Picture yourself standing on the windswept shores of the Black Sea at dawn, the salty mist burning your lungs, your heart pounding in your ears. You are 14 years old. You clutch your mother's embroidered scarf so tightly it cuts into your palm, but she has already been dragged away. Before you can scream, rough hands seize you, tossing you like a rag doll onto the deck of a creaking galley bound for Istanbul. The sky blazes red with sunrise, but you feel only cold, your future as dark as the iron chains at your wrist. They told you you were going to a palace of silk and jewels, where your beauty would be celebrated. They lied. By the time the ship docks at Topkapi Palace, the fabled residence of the Ottoman Sultan, you have lost more than your home. You have lost the right to be human. They march you through grand marble courtyards dripping with fountain spray and haunting echoes, through corridors lined with gold inlays and jewel-encrusted tiles that glint like taunting eyes in the torchlight. At every turn, ambassadors and janissaries, eunuchs and viziers silently appraise you, as though you were an exotic painting meant to be judged and discarded. No one speaks to you. You are given a number in a cold chamber. Your name, Maria, the daughter of a fisherman, is erased in an instant. You inhale the scent of myrrh and jasmine, but there is no comfort here. The palace breathes with secrets, each breath a murmur of longing, of despair, of death. In the days that follow, you learn what it means to be property. Your body is catalogued like cattle at an auction. A matron examines your teeth, your hair, your skin, probing for marks, flaws, signs of disease. You are forced to undress before strangers, women older than you, their eyes sunken with years of confinement, their voices hollow from obedience. You cannot help but tremble, for you know the penalty for failing these inspections could be drowning in the Bosphorus, your small body sewn into a weighted sack and thrown overboard, sinking beneath the waves to a silent grave. These are the hushed rumors told in the candlelit corridors, the unlucky ones who angered the Sultan or dared to cry too loudly. But first, there is the school of silence. Each morning, before the sun burns away the dew, you rise to the call of a distant horn. A skeleton crew of eunuchs leads you and dozens of other captive girls into the palace's inner sanctum, a vast hall of domed ceilings and chanting muffled by velvet drapes. Here, you learn the language of submission. You memorize verses of the Quran in tongues you've never spoken. You learn to recite them with trembling precision, each phrase a chain tightening around your soul. They call it education, but it is indoctrination, an erasure of everything that made you human. Your name, your mother tongue, your memories of home. At midday, they teach you to dance. You curve your spine like a bending reed, your arms floating through the air, your feet tapping a silent rhythm. A circle of scarred veterans watches, offering praise or scorn. If your steps falter, they belt you across the face with a braided leather whip until the sting reminds you that grace is rewarded, hesitation punished. They fill your days with lessons in poetry and music, tuning your voice to the Sultan's taste. You learn to pluck the strings of an oud until your fingertips bleed. You learn to sing amorous couplets in Persian, mouthing words that clutch at your heart yet mean nothing to you. Every skill is a tool to ensnare a man who may never see your face. At night, you are watched. A cadre of matrons perched on divans cloaked in feline skins takes turns observing your sleep. They note every twitch, every gasp, every sigh. You cannot close your eyes without them. They call this care. You call it torment, for a stifled whimper could brand you unstable. The fate of the unstable not whispered, but acted upon in the cold, moonlit cisterns beneath the palace. You discover the hierarchy that governs your world. At the bottom are the odalisques, girl servants who scrub floors and fetch water, who live in bone-chilling chambers beneath the kitchens where rats scuttle through damp stone. There is a glimmer of hope for an odalisque. Perhaps she may catch the eye of a higher-ranking woman, the Kethud, and be trained in the arts of pleasing. But most will never dance for the Sultan. They wear the same color uniforms as you, sky-blue tunics, red sashes, slippers with upturned toes. Their faces are as blank as yours, their eyes hollow with fatigue. Above them stand the Kalfas, veteran concubines who survived the schooling, who have learned the cruel calculus of palace politics. They guard secrets like gold, who among you can sing a certain lullaby, who blushes when touched, who fears water and cannot be bathed by the palace barbers without screaming. These women hold the keys to advancement. They decide who moves from the shadows beneath the kitchens into the gilded courtyards bathed in sunlight. One of these Khalfas takes you under her wing. At first, you think she means kindness. She offers you extra rations of fruit, a small piece of soap scented with rose petals, a stolen page from the Sultan's private library with poems about love. But soon you learn that she is teaching you how to play the game. She is arming you for survival in a place where mercy is a weapon and compassion a liability. She whispers, "Never trust the eunuchs, never show tears, never ask for mercy. Better to laugh, to flatter, to beg favor with a crooked smile than to cry yourself into oblivion." Your first glimpse of the Sultan comes on a day heavy with incense. He strides into the courtyard like a god, mounted on a white stallion whose hooves strike the marble with thunder. His robes are spun gold, his turban bristles with emeralds. He wears an expression of distant boredom, as though the world exists only to amuse him. When his gaze falls on you, the air seems to stop. Your blood freezes in your veins. He appraises you not as a girl but as a creature. Beautiful, pliant, owned. Your heart leaps, then shatters. You realize your life has become a perpetual audition. Every glance, every gesture, every breath measured for the chance, just the chance, of being led into his private chamber. But you also realize that to be chosen is both a blessing and a curse, for you learn quickly that the favored ones are granted luxuries, fine silks, fragrant baths, sumptuous feasts, but they are also the most vulnerable. A single misstep, a single moment of displeasure, and they vanish without a trace, torn from their gilded rooms, their bodies discarded like yesterday's news. As weeks bleed into months, you forge a mask of perfection. You learn to place your words like pearls on a string, soft laughter when the Sultan jokes, gentle songs when he drifts into one of his rare smiles. You learn to keep your eyes downcast, yet flicker your lashes in the precise beat of a heartbeat. You discover the power of silence, how a well-timed pause can ignite interest, how a single sigh can invoke longing. In the smallest chamber behind the main hall, you overhear a conversation that chills you deeper than the Bosphorus wind. Two eunuchs discuss the numbers. How many girls arrived this month? How many survived the examinations? How many perished from disease or despair? The death toll, they say, would shock even the hardiest soldier. Hundreds, perhaps thousands, across 5 centuries. Against the backdrop of imperial splendor, this statistic flickers like a dying candle in a temple of gold. That night, you lie on a mattress stuffed with down feathers, your back aching from the weight of your chains. A single candle guttering beside you casts dancing shadows on the walls. You stare at the ceiling, tracing the cracks, searching for an escape. But there is none. You close your eyes and whisper the name you were born with, Maria, feeling the name burn your lips like a lie. You have become someone else now, a shape molded by fear and desire, by whispers and threats, by the cruel brilliance of imperial ambition. Yet in the smallest corners of your soul, a spark remains. A spark of rage, of hope, of memory. You clutch it close like a secret prayer, wondering if one day you might use it to reclaim your humanity. This is just the beginning of your nightmare, your apprenticeship in cruelty, your baptism in bloodless torment. Ahead lie betrayals and alliances, feasts of unimaginable luxury and fevers that twist your flesh like living torches, night after night of dancing in cages for an audience that may never come. You will learn that kinship is forbidden, that sisterhood is a threat, that empathy is a weakness you cannot afford. And yet, somehow, you survive. You learn to twist your fear into armor. You trade secrets, barter promises, whisper lies that keep you alive. You study the falcons in the courtyard, how they tilt their heads, how they stare without blinking, as though they know a prisoner's mind. You envy their freedom, their fierce solitude, their unbroken spirit, but you are not a falcon, you are a concubine. And in this palace of gold and misery, survival demands forgetting. Forgetting who you were, who you could have been, who you still might be if the world had been kinder. As dawn breaks again over the Bosphorus, you rise, smooth the silk of your tunic, and step into the grand corridor. The palace breathes around you, alive with whispers and secrets. You straighten your spine, lift your chin, and prepare for another day in the Sultan's harem, another day in paradise. The nightmare has only just begun. The dawn light seeps through arched windows as you step into the vast hall of dancers and eunuchs. The polished marble floors gleam beneath your slippers, redolent with the scent of rose water and despair. You have earned the right to join the morning parade today. an honor and a trap. As you glide between columns carved with arabesques of jasmine and myrtle, you feel the weight of 1,000 eyes pressing on your shoulders. Each step you take is a silent plea for survival. The parade begins with the finest kalfas, women who have learned to bend favor to their will. They circle the courtyard like hawks, their movements precise, predatory. Behind them come you and the other odalisks, a river of pale bodies in cerulean tunics, our feet tracing patterns in dust and dew. Above, the Sultan's window sits empty, but you know he watches. His absence is a sharper blade than his presence. Unseen, he can judge without mercy. A shrill whistle slices the air. The eunuchs halt the procession. A line of decorated chests is rolled in, each one swathed in silk and guarded by Mamluks. These are the morning gifts, jewels from distant lands, perfumes distilled from saffron and ambergris, books bound in ostrich leather, and each chest belongs to a concubine. To open it is to be named. Your heart hammers as your chest is wheeled forward. The Kalfa who oversees the parade tilts her head, inspecting the embroidery on your sash. It is threadbare compared to the others, your hands still rough from months of scrubbing palace floors. She frowns, snaps her fingers. A eunuch steps forward and pries open your chest. Inside lies a single silver mirror and a bundle of fresh jasmine tied with blue ribbon. A simple gift, but it is yours. The Kalfa nods and your sash is retied with a knot of darker silk. You have been seen and marked. Whispers follow you as you step aside. She has promise. She will become Kusveti. Watch her. You bow to the sunken-eyed veterans who flank you. Their voices gravel in your ear. Smile more. Remember your lessons. Never let him suspect fear. By midday, you are summoned to the private quarters of the senior Kalfa, Hatish. Her chamber is a world apart. Antechambers hung with crimson carpets, a dais bed draped in violet damask, cushions plumped with goose feathers. Oil lamps flicker against carved mahogany screens. You enter on trembling feet, cupping the mirror to your chest like a shield. Hatice sits on a low divan, her alabaster skin illuminated by amber light. She studies you with dark, slitted eyes, her lips curled in a smile that does not reach her heart. You survived the parade, she says. Few do. Her voice is velvet over steel. And you earned your gift, but a gift means nothing without purpose. She gestures. 2 eunuchs enter, bearing baskets of fruit, pomegranates, apricots, figs. Each is peeled and arranged on a silver platter. Eat, she commands. You must maintain your strength. The Sultan despises weakness. You taste the fruit, its sweetness cloying as Hatice continues. The Sultan sees everything through rumor and reflection. He relies on us, his eyes, his whispers. We feed him stories of loyalty, of betrayal, of hearts broken by desire. She lowers her voice. We choose who rises and who falls. She taps the mirror. This gift is your first lesson. It is how he will see you, as a reflection of his power. You nod, though your stomach churns. You understand, the mirror is both tool and trap. If you break it, your chances of advancement vanish. But polishing it earns notice, and perhaps mercy. Later you are led to the gardens, a labyrinth of hedges scented with night-blooming jasmine and lit by jade-green lanterns. Here, the concubines train in the arts of conversation and flirtation. A circle forms around a mahogany table, where the prized few sit with cups of saffron tea and plates of honeyed almonds. You and 3 others stand behind cushioned stools, learning to speak of love and loss, to speak of things you have never felt. Tell me, the teacher, an aged woman with silver hair braided into a crown, says to one of your companions, about your first heartbreak. The girl's lips tremble. She speaks haltingly of a young soldier at her village, of promises whispered beside the riverbank. Tears spring to her eyes. A hush falls. Too much sentiment, they say. The teacher snaps her fingers. The girl is dismissed, replaced by the next. Finally, it is your turn. Your mind races. You search for a story, anything. You recall a stray cat you once petted, the way its fur glistened in the sun. You speak of loneliness, of a mother whose voice you long to hear. Your words are simple, but they carry the weight of truth. The teacher nods, then suddenly smiles. A victory. You have survived the parade. It is yours. You have learned to weaponize memory. Night falls, and with it comes the ritual of the lamps. Each evening you file into the lamp hall, a cavernous space hung with hundreds of glass lanterns tied with crimson cords. The air smells of wicks and smoke. You settle on your mat among dozens of other concubines, the Khalfa chanting prayers in your ear. One by one, the lamps are lit, filling the hall with dancing points of light. It is here you learn the lesson of shadows. In the flicker, your face seems to shift, youth to age, innocence to cunning. A Khalfa instructs you, watch the flame. See how it refuses to burn but dances on its wick. Be like the flame, captivate him, but never consume yourself. You close your eyes, feeling the heat of the lamp's glow on your cheek, imagining it is his gaze pinned on you. Weeks blur into months. You rise each dawn for drills in language and music, for lectures on etiquette and the proper way to address the Sultan's seal, for exercises in posture and charm. You train your body to move like water and your mind to think like a fox. You memorize his preferences, the cadence of his laughter, the fragrance of his favorite musk, the precise pitch of his sigh. Small gains earn small privileges, a scented cloth to freshen your hair, an extra hour of sleep, the chance to practice your scales on a rare new instrument brought from Andalusia. But the palace is a kaleidoscope of danger. Trust is a currency more volatile than gold. One wrong glance at the wrong woman's coffers, one overheard rumor, one stray word about a lost homeland can land you in the dungeon beneath the harem lick. There, the walls drip with moisture, the air is thick with the stench of rot. No light penetrates, time ceases to exist. Mothers whisper lullabies into the darkness, hoping their babies, born in chains, will survive the fetid air. When the Sultan tires of their silence, he sends a eunuch to decide their fate. Drowned in the cistern, sewn in sacks, stifled by the hush of command. You remember the day you first saw blood in the dungeon, a trickle from a woman's wrist cut by a crude blade, her final protest against the world that stole her youth. You wept, despite the threat of discovery. You learned then that compassion could cost you your life. One morning, as you practice your poetry beside a marble pool, you notice a ripple. No breeze stirs the still air. The Khalfas have gathered in a tight ring, murmuring among themselves. Hatis approaches, her cloak sweeping the ground. She beckons you, your breath stalls. A new chest lies before you, its lock carved with the Sultan's seal. The eunuch unlatches it, inside a single peacock feather. You bow until your forehead touches the cool marble. The Khalfa's words cut like a blade. You may enter the chamber tonight. The feather signifies appointment as possible imperial companion. It is both an honor and an executioner's robe. That afternoon, you bathe in scented oils beneath the watchful eyes of palace barbers. Warm water runs over you like illusion, its comfort fleeting. They trim your nails, pluck your eyebrows, braid your hair into a cascade of obsidian waves. Each careful touch reminds you how much of your life is curated for another's pleasure. You dress in a gown of emerald satin. The fabric hugs your body, glowing with luminescence. You feel exposed beneath so many eyes, but you remind yourself, this is your moment. When night falls, you follow the eunuchs through silent corridors to the Sultan's private apartments, a series of chambers lined with silk screens and mother-of-pearl inlays. You kneel before a low dais as the Sultan reclines on his cushions, a goblet of rose elixir in hand. His gaze is unreadable, but you can feel its weight like the gravity of the moon pulling at the tides of your heart. He asks your name. You had long ago forgotten it, but you summon Maria, the name your mother gave you at birth. It is a defiance born in your throat. He inclines his head as though amused. You recite a line of poetry in Persian. Your eyes are twin lanterns that guide the night's lost dreams. Your voice is steady. The chamber fills with a hush so complete it seems to swallow sound. He gestures and servants bring candles to circle around you, their flames flickering off your emerald dress. You dance, movements honed over endless rehearsals, each sway of your hips, each arch of your back, a petition for his attention. You feel his gaze sharpen, and for a heartbeat, you believe you have won. Then he speaks, in a voice that rumbles like distant thunder. You have talent, but I tire of talent alone. He rises, the cushions fall silent beneath his weight. He approaches, each step echoing like a judge's gavel. He stands before you, eyes boring into yours. You are a single point of light at the intersection of power and vulnerability. Your pulse thrums in your ears. He reaches out, touches your chin. You hold your breath as his fingers brush your skin. "I will keep you," he says, "but know this, to be kept is to be watched, tested, broken." He turns away. You bow, chest tight with relief and terror. As you leave the chamber, the Kalfas line the corridor. Their lips curl in congratulations, but their eyes glint with envy. You have ascended one step on the palace ladder, but each step narrows the rope around your neck. Back in your chamber, you collapse on your mattress, the peacock feather clutched in your fist. Pride and horror war within you. You have pleased the Sultan, but at what cost? Your body hums with ache and triumph. You know that tonight is but the first test of many. In the darkness, you think of the daughters stolen from their homes, of mothers who sold children for coins and lies, of girls who perished before ever knowing the Sultan's name. You clutch the feather closer as though it were a lifeline. You resolve that you will not become a ghost in this palace of living tombs. You will learn the rules, you will survive the tests, you will gather allies in the hidden corners. You will remember who you are. Tomorrow, when the horn sounds at dawn, you will rise again. You will step onto the marble floors, your voice ready, your body poised, your mind sharp. You will dance for the Sultan, you will laugh with the Kalfas, you will feign loyalty to the eunuchs, and you will build your future from the shards of your past. For in this nightmare of silk and chains, only those who remember how to hope can truly be free. And you will not be erased. Night falls over the palace like a velvet shroud, and the corridors grow silent, their opulent tapestries swallowed by shadows. You emerge from your chamber clutching the peacock feather, a talisman of your new station. In these silent hours, alliances whisper beneath draping curtains, debts are traded in the hush of candlelight, and fates are sealed over sips of rosy elixir. You slip through the Harem-lick's labyrinthine corridors, guided by a Kalfa's subtle nod, and enter the alcove where a dozen concubines gather. Their silken robes pool at their feet, moonlight catching jeweled embroidery. They drink tea perfumed with honey and mint, their eyes measuring you, curiosity flickering alongside envy. You bow, offering the feather as proof of your appointment. A chorus of soft gasps rises, and you cradle your breath, fighting the tremor in your fingers. "Congratulations," murmurs Layla, a Kalfa whose favor you once earned by trading a whispered secret. Her smile is warm but fleeting, a candle flame threatened by a stray breath. She inclines her head to a low-burning brazier, its embers casting flickering light across her face. But remember, tonight is only the beginning. You settle onto a cushion beside her as a storyteller begins to recite a legend of burned palaces and queens who died by their own hand. Her voice is a soft instrument that carves grooves of fear and wonder into the air. You listen as the tale unfolds, of a sultan's daughter who plotted escape by hiding knives in her sandals, only to be discovered and entombed alive in a tower of black granite. The moral rings clear, rebellion here is suicide, hope a poison. When the story ends, the Kalfas exchange glances. You sip your tea, tasting the sting of coriander and anise. You steel yourself. Your peers are testing you, gauging whether you will rise on the currents of palace intrigue or drown beneath them. Suddenly, the hush is shattered by a distant cry, the sound of a girl's scream echoing down the hallway. The brazier's embers flare as the storyteller breaks off mid-sentence. In the candlelight, you see panic bloom in the Kalfa's eyes. Layla grips your arm. "They've found her," she whispers. "A novice odalisque. They say she tried to steal a letter destined for outside the walls." You stand, the feather falling from your hand. The alcove's lamps tremble, as though startled by the news. You follow the Kalfas through winding passages until you reach a barred door beneath the spiral staircase. There, palace guards in iron armor stand vigilant, their halberds glinting in torchlight. A single lantern hangs above, its flame guttering in the cold draft. Inside lies the novice, her sky-blue tunic torn, her ankles chained to the stone floor. She weeps silently, her pale cheeks stained with tears. Two eunuchs stand watch, their faces impassive. When they spot you, they step aside, allowing Layla to approach. "She thought she could write to her family," Layla says, voice low. "She begged them to help her escape." The girl's eyes lock on yours, wide, desperate. You see yourself reflected in her fear, the same hunger for freedom, the same yearning for a life beyond these walls. You kneel beside her, placing a gentle hand on her arm. "Why?" you whisper. "Why risk everything?" She trembles, lifting her chin. "Because living like this isn't life." Before you can answer, the heavy metal bolts clank as the senior Khalfa, Hatis, approaches. Her presence hushes the corridor. You bow, your heart hammering against your ribs. Hatis's eyes flick to the chained girl, then to you, then away, as though gauging where your loyalty lies. "She will be judged at dawn," Hatis declares, her voice low and authoritative. "But perhaps mercy can be found." She glances at you, and you realize with a jolt that your influence, your favor with the Sultan, might spare this girl's life. That night, you lie awake on your mattress, the feather pinned to the wall above you. You think of the novice's hollow eyes, of the chains at her ankles. The feather trembles each time the corridor's torchlight flickers across it, as though alive with possibility. You whisper into the dark, "I will help you," though your promise tastes like ash. At dawn, the courtyard is a gallery of marble and marble columns grayed by early light. You follow Hatis and Layla across dew-kissed mosaics toward the pavilion where the Sultan holds court. A low platform of white marble sits beneath gilded eaves. Behind it, a screen of peacock blue silk shimmers. You climb the steps, clutching your prayers. The novice follows, her bare feet clicking against stone. Before the assembly of eunuchs and Khalfas, the Sultan reclines on his dais, his gaze cold as winter's heart. He observes the chained girl without emotion. Around him stand his advisors, wizened men in turbans, their parchment scrolls waiting. You daren't breathe. The chief eunuch speaks first. "Your Majesty, a novice odalisque was caught attempting to flee the palace. She was carrying a letter." He holds up the missive with a steady hand. The parchment is edged in gold, but smeared with moisture, a token of forbidden hope. The Sultan reaches out, plucking the letter from the eunuch's hand. He breaks the seal, scans the words, and smiles, a thin, merciless curve. He rolls the parchment between his fingers. "She dared to speak to the outside world," he murmurs. "She must be taught the consequences of betrayal." He turns his head toward you, his eyes lighting on the peacock feather pinned to your sash. "You receive this gift. You have the wisdom of the harems. Show me mercy or revenge." Your pulse thrums in your ears. You step forward, every movement excruciatingly slow, as though the world itself resists your will. You bow, voice steady. "My Sultan, she is young, frightened, and lost. Grant her another chance. Let her serve in the kitchens or as a cleanser. She will obey every order, learn her lessons." A silence thicker than velvet falls over the marble. The court's eyes burn on you like embers. The Sultan's gaze slides to Hatis, who inclines her head. Then, at last, he laughs, soft, tinkling, cruel. "Spare her," he says. "She sought to leave. Does she not understand that the world outside these walls is for sultans alone?" He waves his hand, and the eunuchs step forward. The novice flinches, tears brimming. You close your eyes, imagining the steel of a whip, the cold plunge of water, but instead you hear a soft command. "Bind her hands," the Sultan says, "and place her among the odalisques. She will learn allegiance through labor." A collective breath unfurls through the court. It is mercy, thin as mist, but enough to transform her fate. The chains unlock and the guards draw back. The novice bows to you, gratitude flickering in her eyes. You exhale, weight lifting from your chest, but mercy in the harem is a brittle gift. The novice is led away by eunuchs. You watch her retreating figure. Hatis clasps your hand, pressing the feather into your palm. "You have done well," she whispers, "but remember, every act of compassion marks you. There will be those who resent it." As you make your way back through torchlit corridors, you sense eyes upon you, some curious, some cold. You clutch the feather tight, aware that kindness here is both a weapon and a target. The next days blur in a whirl of lessons and performances. You practice your poems until your tongue bleeds, refine your dances until your muscles ache, memorize the Sultan's favorite verses in Turkish, Arabic, and Persian. Each achievement is rewarded with tokens, a sprig of orange blossom, a length of silk, a late-night audience in the jewel room, where colored lamps glow like captive moons. But each reward tightens the palace's grip. You have risen higher, and the plummet will be sharper. You observe the novice now among the odalisks, her tunic patched and her spirit subdued. You slip her a scrap of paper one afternoon, on which you scrawl a single word, hope. You tuck it into her sash as you pass. She looks up, eyes shining, as though you have handed her a lifeline. Late one evening, a messenger arrives bearing dark news. A plague has reached the city. Whispers swirl that it spreads through fleas, that it kills children within hours, that the markets teem with bodies. You catch sight of eunuchs fumigating corridors with burning herbs, of concubines hiding behind screens, of Hattis clenching her jaw as she counts the infirm. Fear settles like dust on every surface. The Sultan's orders come swift. Quarantine the harem lake. Gates are sealed. No one enters, no one leaves. Eunuchs in muslin masks patrol the outer galleries. You wake to the clang of doors locked from the outside. The gardens are cordoned off, the pools drained, lamps doused. All that remains is the hush of illness and the dull ache of isolation. In the days that follow, you witness privation you never imagined. Food dwindles. Rations shrink to meager bowls of lentils boiled with salt. Water is precious. You learn to treasure each drop. The odalisks shiver in the cellars, their bodies ravaged by fever. The novice you spared coughs until her chest heaves. The silver tears she sheds as she clutches your hand chills you to the bone. Hattis summons you to the infirmary, a vaulted chamber lined with copper pots and linen bandages. A dozen girls lie on straw pallets, their breaths ragged. The air is thick with the scent of myrrh and sweat. You kneel beside the novice, pressing cool cloths to her fevered brow. She whispers your name, her eyes pleading, "Save me!" You scour the palace for medicinal herbs, crushed rose hips for vitamin C, willow bark for fever, honey to soothe the throat. You mix poultices by candlelight, guided by distant memories of your mother's remedies. You administer teas and broths until your arms tremble with fatigue. You utter prayers in corners where no one can see, bargaining with fate for another dawn. For days, you live in the infirmary's gloom, your skin drawn tight from sleepless nights. You watch life and death dance on the edge of a girl's eyelids, and each time the novice's chest rises with a ragged breath, your heart lurches, a symphony of relief and dread. Then, in the gray dawn of the seventh day, she rouses, her eyes clearing. She whispers, triumph and weakness in her voice, "I will live." Joy blooms in your chest, fierce enough to light the entire palace. You press her hand to your lips, the taste of fever and hope mingling on your tongue. Word spreads of the novice's recovery. You are lauded by Khalfas and eunuchs alike. The Sultan hears of your ministrations and summons you once more. He studies you, expression inscrutable, as he reclines on his dais. You kneel before him, heart pounding. "My Sultan," you say, voice steady, "life is the greatest gift." He inclines his head, then gestures. A chest is brought forth, draped in sapphire silk. You hold your breath as it is opened. Inside lies a single ruby ring, its facets catching the torchlight like blood. The Sultan's lips quirk. "A gift for saving a life," he murmurs, placing the ring on your finger. "But remember, to be treasured is to be owned." As you rise, the ring biting into your skin, you realize the truth of his words. You have traded compassion for chains more precious, more binding than any iron link. Yet in the warmth of that ring, you feel purpose, a reminder that humanity can withstand even this gilded prison. You return to the infirmary, ring hidden beneath your sleeve, and find the novice sitting up, pale but determined. She smiles at you, and in that moment you know your path forward. It is paved with peril and sacrifice, with mercy and cunning, but you have tasted both death and grace, and you carry them within you like fire and ice. Outside, the plague retreats as swiftly as it arrived. Gates open, corridors hum again with battle drums of politics and power. Yet the palace itself has shifted, alliances forged in fear, debts owed in blood and kindness. You walk its halls no longer as a novice, no longer as a hopeful girl stolen from home, but as a force to be reckoned with, a concubine whose compassion has become her weapon, and whose survival has become her vow. The moon sets, unveiling a sky of promise. You stand at your window, gazing across the dark waters of the Bosphorus, your reflection fractured by ripples of light. You close your eyes and whisper to the night, "This palace may own my body, but it will never claim my soul." Tomorrow the parade will resume, the lessons will continue, the Sultan's gaze will fall upon you once more. But now you know the deeper currents of this world, the currents of mercy and terror that shape destinies, and you are ready. For in the Sultan's harem, every moment is a choice between becoming prey or predator, between surrender and defiance, and you choose defiance. Dawn's light spills across the palace turquoise gate as you slip past the eunuchs, the ruby ring hidden beneath your sleeve burning against your wrist. You carry with you the weight of every choice you have made, the lives you have spared, the secrets you have bartered, the alliances you have forged in whispered corridors. Today you will face the culmination of all your lessons, the grand audition, where the Sultan will select a new favorite among his concubines, and where your own fate may be sealed forever. You enter the marble courtyard, where rows of concubines have gathered, their silks rippling like water under the morning sun. The air trembles with tension. Some faces shine with hope. Others are drawn tight with dread. You recall your first parade here, the line of chests, the gleaming mirror, and you steel yourself. Each woman is armed with beauty, each a sharpened blade in this silent war. At the far end of the courtyard, a dais of white marble awaits, backed by peacock blue silks that flutter in the breeze. After a moment's pause, the palace horn sounds, a low, resonant note that reverberates through every bone. The gates open, and the Sultan appears, mounted on a gray stallion so calm it seems carved from stone. His robes, woven with pearls, catch the light. His expression is unreadable. He surveys the assembly, slow as a predator sizing up its prey. You step forward with the others, hearts pounding, as the eunuchs guide you into a semicircle before the dais. The Sultan dismounts, his boots clicking on the marble floor. He stands at the center, his gaze sweeping over each of you. In this instant, time fractures. Your pulse slows, your breath shallows, and memory collapses into the single point of his stare. A master of ceremonies, a Khalfa in mid-blue robes, begins the ritual. One by one, each concubine is called forward to perform a talent, a dance, a poem, a song. The world fades for each girl as she kneels and offers herself through art. Some falter, some shine, but all bear the risk of failure. If the Sultan's interest wanes, a single look away can mark the end of one story. The first performer, a lithe girl with eyes like onyx, steps forward. She spins in a whirl of saffron silk, arms extended, her feet tracing patterns that speak of longing and loss. The Sultan watches impassively, then raises a single finger, a barely perceptible acknowledgement. Relief ripples through her as she bows and retreats. You count the breaths between performers until finally the master summons you. Your heart hammers against your ribs. You move to the center, recalling every lesson, the curves of Hatis's choreography, the cadence of your Persian verses, the subtle tilt of your head that once won the Sultan's favor. You kneel and bow your head, then rise to begin. First, a poem in Turkish. In the hush of dawn, my soul stirs like a hidden dove, bidding the sun to find its way to these silent wings. In your eyes, my Sultan, I see both the oath of day and the promise of night, and in your mercy, I am reborn. Your voice rings clear across the courtyard, each syllable carried on the breeze. You speak not just words, but memory, the echo of your mother's lullabies, the hush of Bosphorus waters, the ache of stolen youth. As you conclude, you bow, hands pressed together, an offering of both humility and power. Next, you stand and dance. Your movements flow from shoulder to wrist, from hip to heel, each gesture crafted to captivate. You imagine the lamp hall's flickering shadows, the first time your body learned its own strength. You channel every lesson, the curve of the reed, the fierceness of the falcon, the courage born from compassion. The courtyard seems to hold its breath as you spin, your silken sleeves blooming like petals. When you finish, you sink to one knee, chest heaving. You taste the heat of the Sultan's gaze. For a moment, he is still, unreadable as stone, then he inclines his head. A ripple of awe passes through the assembled women. You have been acknowledged, but the audition is not yet over. The master signals a final test. Silence. You must hold your posture, your composure, without movement or sound, for a full minute, an eternity. Around you, competitors tremble. You lock your gaze on the Sultan, and the world contracts to that meeting of eyes. In that minute, you feel every second weigh on you. The sun climbs higher. The marble grows hot beneath your knees. Your muscles burn. Yet in the stillness, you find clarity. Compassion is your strength, memory your guide. You remember the novice whose life you saved, whose spark you nurtured. You feel her gratitude coursing through you, a silent current of hope. When the minute ends, the master steps forward and declares the audition complete. The concubines bow and retreat to the fringes, leaving you and two others before the dais. The tension tightens like a noose. The Sultan returns to his dais and gestures. Choose. He addresses you first. You, he says, voice low as distant thunder. Speak of mercy. You kneel and bow. My Sultan, mercy is the gift that saves when strength alone cannot. It is the bond that binds hearts, the breath that carries life beyond fear. You pause, lifting your gaze. In this palace of gold and iron, it is mercy that reminds us we are still human. He nods once. Then he turns to the second girl, a dancer of unmatched grace, and to the third, a singer with a voice of pure crystal. They speak of passion, of loyalty, of beauty. When all is said, the Sultan rises, the courtyard hushed beneath his weight. He approaches you slowly, each step echoing like fate's decree. He stops before you, reaching out to lift your chin. For a heartbeat, you hold his gaze, unflinching. Then he leans forward, and you feel his breath against your cheek. You have learned the deepest lesson, he murmurs, voice almost a caress. Mercy born of memory and pain. You will be my bashkadin, my principal companion. With this ring, I bind you to my service. He places his ring upon your finger, your ruby merging with the silver one. A swell of triumph and terror crashes through you. You bow until your forehead touches the marble, body trembling with gratitude and fear. To be chosen is to be exalted, and to be watched more closely than ever before. When you rise, the courtyard erupts in whispered admiration. Kalfa and eunuch alike bow to you, acknowledging your ascent. You return to your chamber in a daze, the ring heavy on your hand, the feather pinned above your pillow like a banner of survival. But the final part of your journey has only begun. As Bashkadin, you will stand between power and peril. You will counsel the Sultan in private councils, entertain foreign emissaries, and navigate the most treacherous waters of palace politics. You will protect those beneath you, the odalisks and novices, while guarding your own secrets. In your chamber, you light a single lamp and gaze into its flame. You remember every stolen girl, every token of compassion, every choice that led you here. You touch the ring and whisper, I will serve, but never be consumed. I will rule my fate by mercy and memory. In this palace of shadows and splendor, I will be more than prey. Outside, the palace breathes around you. Silken curtains rustle, distant laughter echoes, the Bosphorus murmurs its ancient song. You close your eyes and let the moment wash over you, chosen, bound, and alive. Tomorrow the Sultan will call upon you to guide him through treaties and tragedies, to soothe his darkest fears, to stand by his side as both partner and mirror. You will learn new languages of diplomacy, new arts of persuasion. You will forge alliances within the harem, manage the slaves' whispers, and protect the fragile humanity of those bound to the palace. And when the day's trials are done, you will return here, this chamber of rose-scented tapestries and silent candles, where your heart can rest and remember, for you have become more than a concubine. You are the living testament that even in the Ottoman Sultan's harem, paradise's prison, a single spark of mercy, wielded wisely, can ignite rebellion against cruelty itself. Your nightmare has become your crusade, and at its end lies a destiny of your own making. You awaken before dawn to the hollow echo of palace bells, their distant toll a summons you cannot refuse. At 14, your world has narrowed to the cool stone chambers of the imperial school, where every breath you draw belongs to the emperor's desires. You press your fingertips into the carved relief of a lotus flower above your bed, tracing its petals as though they might bloom beneath your touch. But no flower grows here, only shadows that lengthen with every lesson, every secret whispered under torchlight. They told you this was an honor, to serve at the heart of the empire, to learn the arts that would make you unforgettable. They did not mention the price. not the relentless discipline that shapes your body into a weapon of seduction, not the rituals designed to undo your girlhood and forge you into something new, a living instrument tuned to the Emperor's will. Your day begins with the purification rite. 2 matrons in silver-threaded veils lead you to the alabaster bathing hall, its mosaic floors slick with water. Steam coils around marble columns carved with phoenixes, symbols of rebirth that resonate bitterly in your heart. You step onto the cool tiles and disrobe, the soft rustle of silk against silk your only companion. As warm water cascades over you, they anoint your skin with oils of jasmine and sandalwood, their hands precise as they follow the ancient pattern of points and lines meant to awaken desire. You shiver despite the heat, the intimate touch more clinical than comforting. Next comes the lesson of the gaze. You stand before a gilded mirror, its frame a riot of dragons and lotus blossoms. Across from you stands your instructor, a Khalfa whose eyes are 2 polished onyx stones. She teaches you to hold the Emperor's gaze without blinking, to let your eyes speak the passions your lips cannot yet articulate. Too soft, she murmurs the first time. Too shy. She tilts your chin, guiding your pupils higher until you stare into the farthest corner of the hall, not at your reflection, but at the distant throne you will one day claim. When you master the ember look, eyes half lowered, lashes brushing your cheeks, a flicker of fire held deep within, you move on to the whispered word. In a low-ceilinged chamber, scented with burning myrrh, you kneel before the linguist. She presses a poet's scroll into your palm, verses spun from silk and honey, designed to wrap the Emperor's mind in longing. You repeat each couplet until the words fall from your tongue like petals. In your shadow, I find both ruin and rebirth. In your breath, the promise of dawn and dusk entwined. Your voice trembles, but she corrects your inflection until the syllables drip with honeyed promise. By mid-morning, your legs ache from the dance of the lotus. In a poolside pavilion, lined with pillars carved like reeds, you learn to move with the fluid grace of water lilies. Every sway of your hip, every tilt of your shoulder must mimic the tides, a silent invitation that stirs the heart. You practice for hours, the Khalfa circling you like vultures, their praise as rare as rain. When perspiration beads your forehead and your muscles scream, they finally nod. Your body has become a vessel for seduction's purest form. But beauty without strength is fleeting, hence the trial of the spine. In the armory of the palace, a hush falls as you stand beneath a canopy of gold-embroidered banners. A trainer hefts a slender whip, its braided leather snapping through the air. He cracks it once over your shoulder, a sting that demands upright posture. You correct your stance, chest lifted, back straight as an arrow. Again and again the whip comes until your muscles burn and your spine aches. They will break you, then rebuild you, a sculpture carved from flesh and willpower. At midday, you eat alone in the Hall of Mirrors, a gallery of polished obsidian that reflects your face 50 times over. A single plate of dates and pomegranates awaits you. You consume them slowly, studying each reflection, the curve of your lips, the arch of your eyebrow, the hollow of your collarbone. You learn to recognize yourself not as Maria of the Northern Court, but as a constellation of temptations meant to guide the Emperor's gaze. There is no laughter at this meal, only the quiet hum of distant eunuchs and the soft drip of water from hidden fountains. The afternoon brings the lesson of the tongue, where you taste every flavor the Empire can produce. Sour tamarind, sweet fig, bitter pomegranate rind, the tang of vinegar spiced with saffron. You learn to trace each taste across your palate, to pause with just the right amount of hesitation, so the Emperor might catch the flicker of anticipation in your eyes. Later in the gardens, you practice feeding each other fruit, the delicate placement of a grape between trembling lips, the half-smile that invites shared intoxication. Here, under canopy and jasmine-scented breeze, you practice consent's illusion, the art of seeming to resist while drawing him closer. When evening's lanterns flicker to life, you enter the chamber of echoes where every whisper reverberates. Here you study the sound of your laughter, the timbre of your sighs, the rhythm of your breathing. Elocutionists teach you to modulate volume and cadence so your voice becomes a velvet caress across the marble halls. In the hush between notes, you learn that silence itself can seduce, that a single pause can make a man lean in, craving the rest of your story. Night deepens, and the final lesson awaits, the trial of shadows. In a sealed chamber lit only by oil lamps, you encounter the Emperor's silhouette, a figure carved in darkness against a silk curtain. You must approach without sound, glide across the floor without a whisper of silk, and stand before him until he speaks. When at last the silhouette steps forward and the lamp reveals his face, linen white and half-veiled, you kneel and recite your chosen verse, your gaze unwavering. You offer nothing but yourself, body, voice, soul. Only then does he speak, testing you with a single word or gesture. If you falter, you return to the courtyard's whip. If you succeed, the Khalfas applaud in hushed tones. You have been deemed worthy of smiling upon. Returning to your chambers, you peel off the day's costumes, tunic of gold brocade, slippers of jeweled leather, until you stand once more in the plain shift you wore at dawn. Your body aches, your mind hums, but beneath the weariness a spark glows. The knowledge that you are being transformed into an echo of desire, a reflection of power. You clutch a small wooden token, an ivory carving of a phoenix, engraved with the Emperor's seal. It is your first reward, a promise of greater privileges to come. But midnight stillness brings its own terrors. As you slip beneath linen sheets, the Khalfas enter to record your dreams. They ask, what visions visited you? What yearning stirred in the depths of sleep? You compartmentalize, speak of gardens you once knew, of the sea you left behind, of a father's laughter. But you conceal the secret dreams that haunt you, of freedom, of escape, of life beyond these walls. To reveal those would be to invite suspicion, punishment, so you lie still, recalling only the safe memories, your pulse a quiet drumbeat in your ears. Tomorrow, you know, the cycle will begin anew. Purification, gaze, whisper, dance, spine, mirror, tongue, echoes, shadows. 9 rites to master before the Emperor decides your fate. And after that, placement in his private court, where the lessons become crueler, the tests more intimate, the stakes measured in life and death. But tonight, you close your eyes and surrender to exhaustion, letting the darkness cradle you like a lover's arms. In the pre-dawn hush, as the bells toll once more, you will rise to become someone new, a vessel of seduction, a sculpted ideal of femininity, a sovereign of a realm where love is currency and power wears the guise of affection. This is your baptism into the Emperor's court, a world of gilded cages and whispered promises, where every glance can be a weapon, every smile a contract, and every touch a bind that ties your soul to the palace forever. And so begins your journey, from innocent girl to consummate seductress, from daughter to property, from dreamer to architect of desire. The lessons of the day will shape you, break you, and remake you. But in the crucible of discipline and art, you will discover your greatest power, to transform longing into loyalty, to turn emotion into empire. Thus, the first part of your training concludes, 2,000 breaths, 2,000 lessons, 2,000 steps toward the throne of flesh and will. The path ahead stretches through shadowed corridors and moonlit terraces, across mirrored halls and jeweled pavilions, toward the Emperor's private court where your final form will be revealed. But for now, rest. Gather your strength, steel your gaze, and prepare to awaken once more as the dawn's first servant, ready to learn the next secret in the Emperor's grand design of seduction. The morning sun is barely a pale promise on the horizon when you awaken again, heart still echoing with the pulse of last night's trial of shadows. Your limbs ache from the day before, muscles stiff with effort, skin tender where the whip of the trial of the spine broke you and rebuilt you into a pillar of poise. But there is no time for rest. You dress in the soft shift of white linen and follow the hush of the corridor to the Chamber of Secrets, where today's lesson awaits. Inside, the walls are draped with velvet tapestries embroidered in gold thread, depicting scenes of legendary empresses who once ruled vast kingdoms through cunning as well as beauty. You kneel before the Grand Mistress, an aged woman whose silver hair spills over a gown of indigo silk, like moonlight on water. Her voice is low, each syllable measured. Today, you learn the art of insinuation. A true seductress speaks not with overt desire but with suggestion, planting questions in his mind that he cannot unask. She motions to 3 crystal decanters on a lacquered table, one containing amber wine, another rose-infused water, the third, emerald green tea brewed from rare mountain leaves. Each drink is an invitation. Learn to offer it so that he reaches for your cup before his own. You rise and circle the table, fingertips brushing the polished wood as you study the vessels. The mistress demonstrates a tilt of the wrist here, a soft breath there, and the emperor himself is said to lean forward, curiosity kindling in his gaze. You practice pouring, first too quickly, then too hesitatingly, until at last the arc of wine tumbles into your goblet with a gentle sigh. You lift the cup to your lips, drawing the liquid in slow, deliberate sips that leave the corners of your mouth glistening. In the mirror behind you, your reflection is doubled and redoubled until it seems you stand amid a sea of yourself, each figure offering a different nuance of invitation. Shy, bold, teasing, coy. From the chamber of secrets, you are led to the hall of council, where today's trial is intellectual rather than physical. Ornate columns flank a long marble table carved with the names of emperors past. Seated upon low stools are veteran scholars and advisors, men whose voices shape policies and marriages alike. You and 4 other trainees sit across from them, each armed with a scroll of poetry, a question for debate, and a single fact gleaned from the empire's vast archives. The task: weave beauty and wit into discourse, so that even a discussion of grain taxes or border treaties sounds like a sonnet. You begin in the debate on tariffs, reciting your opening lines with a clarity honed in the hot chamber of elocution. An empire feeds not only its people but its soul, you say, voice ringing, and tariffs must nourish both the stomach and the spirit. A murmur ripples through the hall. You follow with evidence of successful grain exchanges with distant provinces, pairing each statistic with a flourish of metaphor, the ebb and flow of commerce as tides that lift all ships. The advisors nod, surprised at the seamless marriage of logic and lyric. As applause echoes softly, you feel the power of words like silk draping over steel. Noon finds you in the silken library, a cathedral of scrolls and codices lit by shafts of honeyed light. Today's lesson is in the secret history of the imperial court, lore not taught to ordinary scribes. You learn of empresses who saved dynasties by revealing truths in whispers, of noble women who incited revolts through coded letters hidden in flower petals, of queens who seduced enemy generals into alliance with nothing more than a knowing glance. Each story is a blueprint for subtle influence. You take notes in a small ledger bound in crimson leather, the pages already swollen with the weight of knowledge that could topple emperors if wielded correctly. By afternoon, you are in the Garden of Reflections, where a secluded alcove hosts the trial of masks. Here, you must don one of 3 porcelain masks, each representing a facet of feminine power: the mask of laughter, the mask of tears, the mask of silence, and improvise a scene in front of an audience of kalfas and eunuchs. You choose the mask of tears, plastered with painted sapphires over the eye holes, and step onto the pale stone dais. The scene: you are the abandoned wife of an exiled prince, pleading for mercy before the emperor's court. You begin with a shuddering sob, voice breaking like a cresting wave. As you collapse to your knees, tears, real and artful, trace paths down your cheeks. You see the audience lean in, their breaths caught in their throats. In the final moment, you raise your head, mask glinting, and reveal a defiant smile behind the tears, a reminder that sorrow can be weaponized. When you conclude, the hush breaks into a single sharp clap from the same grand mistress who looked upon you weeks ago as a blank canvas. Twilight draws near as you enter the Hall of Mirrors once more, this time for the trial of the Gilded Tongue. You stand before the length of reflective glass, a kalfa reading aloud fragments of foreign correspondence, the love letters of a distant shah to his concubine, the trade negotiations cloaked in compliments between 2 empires, the veiled threats, hidden in diplomatic gifts. Your task: translate each dispatch from its coded language into plain court etiquette, revealing the true intent without betraying secrets. Your hands shake with excitement as you render a flowery compliment into a direct request for military support, then a polite threat into a bribe disguised as an act of friendship. Your translation dances between the lines of truth and deception. The kalfa nods, extinguishes the candles, and you depart, heart racing. Night descends, but your training does not end. In the subterranean vault of whispers, you confront the trial of the echo, where a single secret, no matter how trivial, must be passed through 6 women without altering a syllable. The corridor is carved from stone, damp and echoing. You whisper a line learned earlier that morning: The silver coins from the western caravans taste of bittersweet ash. It travels from lips to lips, and by the time it returns to you, it is intact. Then you whisper a second phrase, one you invent on the spot, a rumor about the emperor's health, and marvel as it weaves its way through the chain unbroken. Only when you stumble, when the rumor shifts into an accusation, do the Khalfas instruct you to repeat, refining your clarity and control until any falsehood you choose can be transmitted flawlessly. At the stroke of midnight, you stand before the emperor's closed door for the first time since your baptism into the court. 2 eunuchs guard the carved teak entrance, their lanterns flickering like captive fireflies. You clutch the ivory phoenix token to your heart, a reminder of your promise to transform longing into loyalty. With measured breath, you present the token. The door swings open, revealing a dimly lit vestibule hung with silken tapestries. Inside, the emperor awaits. Not a silhouette, but a living ruler draped in velvet and gold, his eyes the color of storm clouds. Without a word, he motions you forward. Every lesson you have learned, how to speak without speech, to move without motion, to seduce without sight, converges in this moment. You step across the threshold, heart steady, body poised, mind alight with the power of all you have become. The door closes behind you with a final, echoing thud. In the hush that follows, you sense the next phase of your trial beginning. You have mastered rituals and tests, poetry and politics, tears and laughter. Now the true test awaits, the Emperor's counsel. In the velvety dark, you feel both predator and prey, taught to seduce yet bound to obey. But as you kneel before him, token extended, you recall the tapestry of lessons woven through every chamber and courtyard. You bow your head and offer the whispered words you have crafted for this hour. Verses that speak of devotion and destiny, of mercy and conquest. You do not know what dawn will bring, favor, oblivion, or perhaps something more dangerous still. But you have been forged in oil and incense, in mirrors and music, in tears and triumph. You are no longer the girl who arrived at sunrise. You are the embodiment of seduction's grand design, a living testament to the power of artifice and will, ready to command an empire with nothing more than a glance and a whisper. You emerge into the jade-scented light of dawn, the trials of yesterday still humming beneath your skin like distant thunder. The chamber's heavy door has closed behind you, sealing away the hush and flicker of lamplight where you face the Emperor's council. Now you stand alone in the privy courtyard, its marble tiles ablaze with the rising sun. In this quiet, you taste both triumph and trepidation. You survive the closed door, but you also know that favor in the imperial court is a flame easily extinguished. Your first act is to return to the Silken Library, that sanctuary of scrolls and secrets, where you once drank deeply of empresses' clandestine histories. Today, you seek counsel in margins, notes left by Khalfas who learned these lessons before you. Their fine script coils around recipes for discreet potions, coded instructions for passing messages in perfumed letters, and diagrams of hidden passages behind tapestry hinges. You trace your finger along the parchment. Each symbol is a reminder that power in this world is woven as much from knowledge as from beauty. By mid-morning, you join the new cohort of concubines in the Garden of Echoes, where trials are both physical and philosophical. You settle onto a mosaic bench beneath a flowering quince tree that hums with hidden bees. Nearby, the eldest Khalfa, Fatima, instructs the group in the lesson of reverberation, how to carry the Emperor's words like sacred echoes through the court, shaping policy by repetition. You watch as novices practice, a single phrase whispered into a golden shell, then repeated 3 times in different chambers, until every ear in the palace recalls it as gospel. When your turn comes, you hold the shell to your lips and recite yesterday's decree on grain tariffs, a speech you delivered in the Hall of Council. You whisper it low, then repeat, adjusting cadence to turn it from bureaucratic edict into aphorism. An empire's heart beats in the bellies of its people, you murmur, and the measure of its strength is counted in each shared loaf. The shell catches the words, and you send them forth, knowing they will ripple through corridors and divans, shaping the court's mood before they reach the Emperor's ears anew. Next, the trial of the perfumed whisper awaits in the apothecary wing. A dozen alabaster jars stand on carved shelves, their lids embossed with the calligraphy of distant lands, musk of the Persian desert, ambergris from the coast of Africa. night-blooming tuberose harvested under the crescent moon. Today you must concoct a fragrance that embodies persuasion itself, a scent that lingers on a silk hem and compels the wearer's confidants to bend toward your counsel. You begin by crushing dried rose petals, their crimson dust coating your palms like velvet. You weigh equal parts of sandalwood powder and musk, then add a thread of myrrh resin for its bitter note. You stir the mixture with a sprig of jasmine, inhaling deeply as each layer unfolds on your senses. You finish with a drop of saffron distillate, a thread of gold in the dark potion. You dab the oil onto a swatch of white muslin and tuck it into your sash. By afternoon, you will test its effect on 2 senior eunuchs, observing whether they unconsciously linger near your presence, whether their voices soften when you speak. But the day's true crucible lies in the Hall of Fates, a domed chamber beneath the palace built for those who seek to read destiny in shadows. Here, a ring of silver basins is filled with water and votive oils. Each basin corresponds to an aspect of court life: influence, loyalty, intrigue, ambition. You kneel before the basin of intrigue, where a single oil lamp's flame flickers on the still surface. The matron instructs you to drop a single lotus petal into the basin, then ask aloud the question that has turned in your heart since earning the emperor's favor. Who among the concubines plots your downfall? You cradle a pale petal and whisper the names of the 2 women most favored: Layla, whose laughter rings in the private alcove, and Katya, whose cold intellect shaped yesterday's policy debate. You release the petal, watching it drift to the center. The matron gestures, and you peer into the basin's reflection. There lies your own face, overlaid with crimson veins of ink drawn by the lantern's glow, an image of treachery and trust entwined. You swallow against a sudden constriction in your throat. The oracle's lesson is clear. The lines between friend and foe blur with each act of mercy and each display of power. You leave the Hall of Fates with a spool of silk ribbon and a small vial of rosewater, tokens to braid into the hair of the concubine you suspect most. The ribbon will carry your message, the rosewater your seal. It is a test of subtlety, to probe loyalty without overt accusation, to gauge reaction by a simple gift. When evening falls, you will present it to Katya during the Dance of Veils, observing her response as the music coils through the night. Yet politics is not the sole domain of cunning. At sunset, you return to the Chamber of Dusk, a crescent-shaped alcove glazed in colored glass that casts ruby and sapphire shadows across carved benches. Here, the lesson of repose teaches that stillness can speak louder than movement, that by holding oneself in perfect calm, one can project authority and grace. You sit with arms folded, eyes closed, breathing evenly as novices rush through elaborate dance steps beside you. A Kalfa prowls the room, noting who breaks composure and who holds the hush. You feel your body relax, every muscle unspooling tension, until you become a statue of serene power amidst chaos. Later, in the moonlit garden of reflections, the Dance of Veils commences. Silk scarves and hues of twilight drape lightly from each dancer's shoulders. The music, a haunting refrain of ode and neigh, pulses like a heartbeat. You approach Katya, offering the ribbon and rosewater with a low nod. Her eyes flicker, surprise, calculation, then something softer, almost gratitude. She draws you into the circle and you move together, stepping as one through swirling patterns of light and shadow. Each turn is a conversation, each sway a negotiation. You watch her closely. If she reveals a tear, a smile, a scowl, she bows her head in thanks, then slips the ribbon into her hair. The rosewater scent lingers between you, a silent pact. As midnight nears, the courtyard's lamps are extinguished one by one, leaving only the sky's pale lanterns. You slip away to the Tower of Letters, where gilt-edged desks wait for those who craft the Empire's written words. Tonight's assignment is to draft a petition to the Emperor on behalf of an outlying province facing drought. You must employ every lesson of persuasion, opening with praise, weaving in statistics like jewels, ending with an appeal to loyalty and vision. You dip your quill, recalling the lessons of language and tone learned in the Hall of Council, recalling also the Oracle's warning in the Hall of Fates, to speak truth wrapped in subtlety. As your hand moves across parchment, you craft the petition. Most august sovereign, whose light guides the realm beyond horizon's edge, we, the humble stewards of the province of Harem Plains, beseech your benevolence. Though our fields lie parched and our granaries thin, our devotion remains unbroken as the mountains that crown our land. Grant us water drawn from the Sultan's canals, that our children may know bread and our merchants bear silk anew. In return, we pledge tribute and unwavering allegiance, our hearts bound to your glory as the rivers to the sea. You sign with your silken ribbon and seal with a drop of the rosewater you used tonight. This document, carried by a eunuch at dawn, will bear your subtle signature to the emperor's desk. It is your voice in the realm's governance, a demonstration that seduction's arts extend to empire itself. Finally, before you retire, you return to the privy courtyard for one more moment of reflection. The air is cool, the marble quiet. You kneel, placing both hands on the carved lotus relief above the central fountain. You breathe in the scent of night-blooming jasmine, tasting its sweetness on your tongue. You remember the girl who first arrived at sunrise, her innocence stripped away by ritual and test. Now you are both sculptor and sculpture, shaped by countless trials, yet holding within you the spark of defiance that will never be quenched. You rise and trace your palm over the carved petals. Compassion. You trace the seed pod at the center. Ambition. You lift your head to the sky where the moon's orbit is steady as fate. In the hush of the night, you whisper your vow. I will wield my influence with mercy as with steel. I will bend desire into devotion. I will shape policy and passion alike, until the empire itself is guided by a touch that once trembled in fear. I am both artist and weapon, composer of longing and architect of will. Let the world remember that even within these gilded walls, a single woman's voice can change the course of history. With that, you step back into the shadowed corridors, ready to embrace whatever dawn may bring. The third part of your journey is complete. You have mastered intrigue, perfume, dance, repose, and rhetoric. You have spun petitions of silk and vine, forged alliances in song and scent, and sent messages through veils and letters. Yet ahead lie the final trials, intimacy's labors, the emperor's intimate counsels, and the ultimate question. Will you shape the emperor's heart, or will he bend yours? Only one path remains, the ascent to his private court, where love, loyalty, and power will intertwine in the crucible of his bedchamber. There, in the hush before dawn, you will learn whether seduction is conquest or surrender, and whether the soul can stay unbroken when cradled in imperial arms. Rest now, for tomorrow you take your first steps toward that chamber. And when the sun rises, you will awaken as more than a concubine. You will awaken as the empress of influence itself. She arrived with the silence of silk on stone. The doors to the emperor's private audience hall had not yet opened, but the scent of rare frankincense already announced her. The eunuchs lowered their eyes. The court ladies stood still. The torches burned lower in her presence, or so it seemed, for this was no mere consort. This was a woman trained for years not to love, not even to obey, but to mesmerize. The emperor, hidden behind a screen of carved sandalwood, knew she had entered before his eyes could confirm it. He did not speak. He did not need to. Her first test had already begun. In the dim light, she moved like a shadow shaped by music. She knelt, but not like a subject, number, like a storm bowing before the mountain it would one day consume. All across empires, China, Persia, Byzantium, this moment was engineered with precision. From girlhood, royal women were taught not to ask for attention, but to become the attention. Their bodies were trained in the art of stillness and suddenness, to walk so silently that a ruler would feel their presence before he heard it, to speak so sparingly that every word clung to the mind like perfume on skin. She spoke now. Only 3 words, a phrase taught to her in the house of lessons. The exact words didn't matter. It was the delivery. The tone dipped like a brush into ink, then trailed across the air with an elegance that made even the guards on the far side of the room lean closer. This was not seduction, as the commoners knew it. It was not beauty, nor obedience, nor overt desire. This was architecture, emotional architecture. She had studied it, practiced it, perfected it. Her teachers were retired courtesans, poets, disgraced queens, former lovers of emperors long dead, women who had survived palaces with poison in the perfume and daggers hidden behind smiles. These instructors passed down what no scroll could teach. There were the 12 glances of longing, each suited to a different temperament of emperor. There were the 8 silences of submission, each more deceptive than the last. There was the art of serving tea not as refreshment, but as theater. Every turn of the wrist, every subtle quiver in the fingers, a calculated suggestion of vulnerability, power, intrigue. Now, before the emperor, she served his drink as though her heart trembled in fear of rejection. But the cup, held with both hands and eyes lowered, was a lure, not a gift. He sipped. He said nothing. She smiled slightly. She had passed, but her training went far beyond the bedroom or throne room. It extended into matters of state. Royal women were not mere ornaments. They were mirrors. They were taught to reflect what emperors desired to see in themselves. If he fancied himself a scholar, she quoted rare lines of Confucius, misremembered just enough for him to correct. If he imagined himself a poet, she praised verses he had yet to write. If he longed for conquest, she played the frightened dove seeking protection. Seduction was not a moment. It was a sustained performance. At night, within the chamber of silks and shadows, the lessons continued. A royal woman must learn to listen with her skin, not just her ears. The tone of breath, the tension in hands, the way a ruler rolled over in sleep. Each detail a clue, each clue a key. The more she learned, the more she adapted, not to survive, to ascend. One young woman, named Siddiqa in the chronicles of a Persian court, was said to have risen from 5th concubine to grand favorite in less than 2 moons. She never raised her voice. She never argued. She simply observed. One night, while massaging the emperor's hand, she asked him to tell her the story of the first falcon he trained. He had never spoken of that falcon to anyone. When he asked how she knew, she only smiled. He never asked another question. The emperor built her a lake, but behind every such triumph was fear. Training to seduce emperors was training to survive a place where love could get you killed. One wrong glance, one too bold phrase, and you could be demoted, exiled, or worse, made invisible. The House of Lessons taught this too. Young girls were made to watch tapestries depicting the deaths of the reckless. They read whispered accounts of favorites who fell from grace. They learned the art of retreat, how to disappear just enough to be missed, but not enough to be replaced. And so, as our royal woman entered her 3rd week in the emperor's favor, she began her next phase. Withdrawal. She allowed her smile to fade more quickly. She hesitated at his door before entering. She asked questions that hinted at a life before the palace, an orchard, a brother, a melody half remembered. She seeded mystery like a gardener in moonlight. Each withdrawal created hunger. Each distance created desire. The emperor summoned her more often. She declined twice. He grew restless, furious even, but this too was part of the script. The court's oldest women knew. A man does not know how much he craves you until he tastes absence. And the emperor, raised in power and praise, was not used to wanting. She made him want. Within the golden cage of her quarters, she prepared. Oils were applied to her hair, not just for scent, but because memory clings to fragrance. She rehearsed her next 3 visits to his chambers as if they were plays. She studied the reports from the palace astrologer and timed her return to coincide with a night of supposed good omens. She wore a color that reminded him of the robes he wore as a child, green and soft, the exact hue of nostalgia. When she returned, he did not speak. He took her hand and said only, "Where did you go?" She had trained for this question. She leaned in and whispered, "I went nowhere. You simply closed your eyes." He stared at her, and that night, in the hidden pages of his diary, found centuries later in a compartment of carved ivory, the emperor wrote one line, "She walks through my mind like a ghost who knows all my secrets." This, the instructors at the House of Lessons would say, was the final measure of a successful seduction, not pleasure, not love, not conquest, but memory. To remain in the emperor's mind long after your footsteps fade, to be dreamed about when all others sleep beside him, to be feared, not for power, but for how close you are to becoming unforgettable. And so, across empires, dynasties, and deserts, royal women train not just to seduce, but to linger, long after the empire falls. But seduction is a fragile empire, and even the most carefully trained woman eventually stands before the truth that no matter how well one plays the game, the board always belongs to someone else. In the years after her rise to imperial favor, the woman who had once been a shadow in the doorway became a name whispered in envy and fear. Her scent was copied, her hairstyle imitated. The younger concubines were instructed to observe her mannerisms as if studying a sacred scroll. Servants brought her messages with trembling hands. Eunuchs asked for her blessings before major ceremonies. She had become what her teachers had promised she could be. But above all, she had become lonely, because to be desired was not to be loved, and to be remembered was not to be safe. She lived in a palace of mirrors, each one reflecting a version of herself that no longer felt true. In the morning, she was a consort, in the evening, a counselor, at night, a performer, and somewhere, hidden between candle shadows, a woman who remembered a name she was no longer allowed to say out loud, the name her mother once whispered in the rice fields before she was taken, before she became a lesson. No royal woman was trained to survive happiness, only its illusion. In the house of lessons, they had prepared her for jealousy, for tests, for rivals with poisoned intentions, but they never taught what to do when the emperor began to need her too much, when his desire turned to obsession, when he forbid her from leaving the palace for ceremonies, when he refused to sleep unless her head rested beside his, when he began to see her not as a consort, but as a possession. He began dreaming of her death, not out of cruelty, but because he feared she might leave. This, the old instructors never said, but the most dangerous moment for a seductress is when the emperor falls in love, and worse still, when he begins to fear he is not loved in return. She smiled still, she performed still, but in secret she began planning her escape, not from the palace, but from the center of his mind. She requested fewer visits, she praised her rivals, she asked to be made a spiritual attendant in one of the court temples, citing omens and dreams. But the emperor was not fooled. He gave her a jewel in the shape of a snake. He told her, "This serpent has no venom unless you leave." In old empires, royal women were not allowed to age in peace. Those who lost favor were given 3 paths: silence, seclusion, or sudden death by accident. But those who still held sway, those like her, walked a finer line. Their very presence became threatening. Their mastery, once admired, turned to suspicion. Was she manipulating the ministers? Was her influence over the emperor clouding his judgment? Were her whispered words guiding matters of war and succession? In truth, she had done nothing, and everything. She had followed the teachings, woven herself into his memory, become the blood in the heart of the empire. And now, the empire wanted her gone, so she disappeared in the only way such women could. Slowly, she faked illness. She appeared in public only veiled. She trained a younger girl, softly, subtly, to copy her style and gestures. And on the final day, she appeared before the emperor with her hands empty. No perfume, no poetry, no silks, only silence. He asked her, "Do you still love me?" She looked at him and said, "You have never needed me to." That night, she vanished from court records. No execution, no exile, only the faintest mention in the diaries of a court scribe that a favored consort had retired to a temple in the northern mountains, where the snow never melted and the wind carried songs in a language no longer spoken. But her legend endured, because other girls came, and they too were trained. They studied her story, her glances, her silences. They learned the serpent's walk, the moonlit gaze, the laughter that never revealed its teeth. In every empire, across the centuries, she became the model. Her name forgotten, her methods remembered. She was not the first, she would not be the last. Because in the oldest palaces of the world, the art of seduction is still taught behind locked doors. Not for pleasure, not for beauty, but for survival, for power, for the unseen empresses who rule from the shadows. And if you ever find yourself walking through an ancient court and you see a woman standing alone beneath a cherry tree, watching the emperor with eyes like smoke, know that she is not waiting. She is working. She is not falling in love. She is being remembered, and when the empire forgets her name, it will still carry her lessons. For the greatest seduction is not to be desired, but to never be erased. The lanterns have already been lit. A hush settles over the marble floors of the palace like a silken veil, wrapping the corridors in a delicate tension. From far beyond the lattice-work windows, the sun has retreated into the desert's embrace, leaving only its memory on the warm stones. And somewhere behind gold-embroidered curtains, where the air smells of jasmine and almond oil, the women of the harem are preparing for another night, not of freedom, but of performance. The harem was never just a place of desire. It was a labyrinth of obedience, a stage of endless rehearsals, and above all, a prison, gilded in luxury, soaked in silence. Behind the tiled walls and carved doors lay hundreds of lives, lived entirely out of sight. Each woman bore a name she hadn't chosen, a scent she was told to wear, a story crafted for her by someone else. And tonight, like every night, the play must go on. A slow rhythm begins to build, carried on the rustle of silk slippers and whispered instructions. Eunuchs move like shadows, unseen but never absent. Their voices are quiet but precise. One girl is told to wear the turquoise veil. Another is asked to sit closer to the incense brazier so her skin will absorb the scent. Still another is warned to hide the bruise on her arm with pearl powder before the Sultan arrives. Each step is practiced, each glance choreographed. The favored concubines do not rush. They glide. Their hair has been brushed for hours, their laughter rehearsed to sound effortless. A flick of the wrist must look spontaneous, though it has been drilled into them for years. They do not compete with words, only with the lingering memory they hope to leave behind when the Sultan closes his eyes. And for those not chosen tonight, they wait, in chambers just out of view, where the cushions are no less soft, but the silence feels heavier. These women braid each other's hair in nervous patterns. They trade stories about who cried last night, who fainted during the bath, who dared to speak too loudly during the midday prayers. The harem is a palace of women, but there is no sisterhood here, only survival, and dreams that must remain unspoken. One girl lies flat on her stomach, staring at a cracked tile in the ceiling, tracing its lines with her eyes like a forgotten map. She has not seen the outside world in 5 years. She doesn't remember the sound of carts in the street, or the taste of honey that hasn't been sweetened by silver spoons. She doesn't remember her mother's voice, only the chanting of the harem tutors, only the lessons, how to bow, how to weep, how to make a man believe he is powerful. They call it a school, but it feels more like a slow drowning. In another room, an older woman paints kohl around her eyes for the 1000th time. She knows she is no longer favored. The Sultan hasn't spoken to her in months, but she paints still, because the moment she stops is the moment they notice, and the moment they notice is the beginning of the end. She smiles at the younger ones with practiced warmth, though her heart is heavy with stories she is not allowed to tell. She was once the favorite too. She remembers the night she was summoned and the way the eunuchs bowed to her. She remembers the pearls, the bathwater that smelled like rose hips, the silks pressed by hand. She also remembers the silence afterward, how quickly desire forgets its promises, how fast gold turns cold. In the courtyard, the moon casts lattice shadows on the stone, and a quiet procession begins. The Sultan will soon choose whom he will see tonight. A perfumed hand will be extended, a name will be whispered, a girl will be taken. The rest will be left behind to dream of a future that may never come. The chosen one is not always the most beautiful. Sometimes she is the quietest. Sometimes she is the one who reminds him of someone he once loved, or someone he once lost. And so the girls study each other like rivals on a battlefield, reading gestures the way soldiers read enemy movements. One false move and months of preparation vanish like smoke. A knock at the door. The moment has come. The youngest girl in the group is led forward. She tries not to tremble, but her fingers betray her. She clutches the hem of her robe too tightly. The other women avert their eyes, not out of politeness, but out of calculation. She is no longer one of them for tonight. She belongs to the game now. The Sultan will take her by the wrist, and she will become a story. Not her own story, of course, but his fantasy, his need, his hunger. And when he tires of her, tomorrow or next week or in 10 years, she will return to the same corridor, a little older, a little quieter, and far less visible. The harem does not punish with whips. It punishes with time. The women who are never summoned again are not removed. They are left in silk chambers with food brought by silent hands and music that never stops playing. Their beauty preserved like museum pieces, untouched, unused. They are reminders, ghosts, living warnings to the others. Tonight, as the music starts and the incense thickens, The walls of the harem pulse with memory. Each stone has heard 100 secrets. Each cushion holds the weight of 1,000 dreams. The night moves slowly here. Time stretches like warm honey, sweet but suffocating, and above it all, the Sultan's chambers await, soft, golden, and terrifying. In this palace, desire is never gentle, and freedom is a rumor whispered through keyholes. She is not permitted to knock. The eunuchs open the carved door for her, then vanish into silence. The chamber ahead glows in hues of amber and gold. Lanterns swing softly on their chains, casting trembling shadows across silk tapestries embroidered with verses of desire and dominion. The air is thick with oud and orange blossom. There are no windows. There is no escape. She steps in barefoot. Her ankles jingle faintly with gold bells, too soft for fear, too deliberate to ignore. Her robe, chosen by someone else, is nearly weightless, but the expectations sewn into its hem are heavy beyond measure. She keeps her eyes low, because she has been told that looking too directly at the Sultan, too early, is arrogance. Looking too late is indifference. It is a ritual she has practiced in her mind 1,000 times. Tonight she must become art, and art must never reveal the artist's exhaustion. The Sultan reclines on cushions the color of old blood. His face is unreadable, neither cruel nor kind. He gestures and she moves forward, each step a performance of obedience. The floor beneath her feet is warm. She wonders how many others have walked this path, how many dreams have dissolved between these walls like perfume on skin. He says nothing at first. Instead, he watches. That is what unnerves her most. Not the danger, not the power, but the silence. He has learned to dominate without words. The silence is louder than any command, and she is left to guess what he sees when he looks at her. Does she remind him of his mother? A concubine he once loved? A betrayal he never forgot? She kneels, not because she wants to, but because centuries of women have done so before her. She pours wine into a cup he holds out without turning his head. Their fingers do not touch. That, too, is intentional. Every moment here is engineered with the precision of war. She knows that tonight will end with her leaving either a trace on his memory, or none at all. The harem tutors once told her this. A successful concubine is never herself. She is water, shaped by his vessel. She is smoke, twisting to avoid being caught. She is illusion, real only as long as he believes in her. So she speaks gently now, not about herself, but about the stars, the breeze she remembers from her childhood, the scent of wet figs in the summer. All fictions, all designed to cast a spell. He listens, or pretends to. It doesn't matter. Her voice must be melodic, her eyes soft. Her sorrow must be invisible. That is the most difficult part. For deep within her, another voice still screams, the one that remembers the village she came from, the brother who tried to hide her when the soldiers came. The night she was told she had been chosen, a word that means something very different to men than it does to women. She remembers it all, but none of it belongs in this room. So she smiles, even as her heart beats a funeral rhythm beneath her ribs. The Sultan finally speaks. A question, harmless on the surface, but she knows it is a test. Everything here is a test. She answers in a way that flatters his intelligence without challenging it. She feigns curiosity, never defiance. He seems satisfied, and just like that, she has passed the first threshold of the night. He motions toward the music. A girl appears, veiled and trembling, carrying a qanun. She sits by the edge of the chamber and begins to play, each note falling like a tear in a quiet lake. The Sultan closes his eyes, and the girl before him, tonight's chosen one, is forgotten for a moment. She breathes in the lull and gathers herself, but it doesn't last. His eyes open, and his command is final. She must dance. The dance of the harem is not wild, it is not joyful. It is not meant to express, it is meant to entice. Every movement calculated, every sway of the hip loaded with intention. She moves slowly, gracefully, without meeting his gaze. She has been trained to seem as though this moment was her own idea, as though desire, submission, and elegance come naturally. They don't. She is exhausted. But the music goes on. Behind the curtains, other women listen, not out of jealousy, but fear, because they know what happens to the girl who fails to please. She is not punished, she is simply forgotten. She returns to her chamber and disappears into the ranks of the invisible, no longer summoned, no longer seen. Eventually, her silks are passed to someone younger. Her perfume bottles remain untouched, and when she dies, years later, no one remembers the name she once answered to. Back in the chamber, the dance ends. The Sultan claps once, softly. The girl freezes, unsure if it is praise or dismissal, but he nods and she is allowed to sit, closer now, close enough to smell the amber oil on his neck, close enough to see the years behind his eyes. He is not cruel, she realizes, not in the way stories would have it, but he is dangerous in a far worse way. He is indifferent, and that, in the harem, is the most fatal trait of all. He reaches out, not to touch her, but to tilt her chin, a gesture that says, "You exist now because I permit it." She doesn't flinch, she cannot. Flinching is a language she understands too well. She responds instead with a soft murmur, something vague and pleasing, something that makes her seem mysterious. That's the trick. Be memorable, but not too bold. Be graceful, but not too familiar. Be unforgettable, without ever being known. As the night thickens, the walls feel closer. The chamber becomes a cocoon of velvet and quiet dread. Outside, the harem is still wide awake. Other girls are bathing, scenting their skin, whispering to mirrors in desperate rehearsal. One of them will be next. The Sultan rises. The moment is over. A gesture from him, and the eunuchs appear again, silent, efficient, without faces. She is led away, her footsteps light, her mind heavier than ever before. She has survived the night, but that does not mean she has won. In her chamber, the other girls look up as she enters. No one asks what happened, they already know. They can smell the smoke of his room clinging to her. They can see the flush on her cheeks. They can hear the difference in her silence. She lies on her cushion, stares up at the ceiling, and waits. Because in the harem, the worst thing is not being used, it's being discarded. And the difference between the two is often just one night. The sun never truly sets in the harem. Even when night falls, even when the oil lamps are extinguished one by one, there is always light, faint, golden, unending. It filters through pierced wooden screens, spills across marble floors, glows beneath doors. Shadows walk like whispers along the corridors, trailing behind eunuchs and wet-haired concubines. Sleep does not come easily here, not because of noise, but because of memory. She lies awake, her body still aching from the weight of the Sultan's gaze, her thoughts drifting like incense smoke. The silk pillow beneath her cheek is embroidered with birds, none of which have wings. The symbolism is not lost on her. No one dreams freely in the harem. In the chamber beside hers, someone is crying softly. In another, a girl is laughing too loudly, perhaps at nothing, perhaps to herself. Another is whispering prayers in a language no one else understands. The walls are thin, lives leak through them. She turns on her side and watches the ceiling, tracing the floral carvings that repeat endlessly in circles, like the lives of the women below them. A servant girl enters without knocking. She brings warm milk steeped with crushed almonds and rose water. The girl doesn't speak. She doesn't have to. They both understand what silence means here. The night moves forward slowly, thick as honey. Somewhere, a lute begins to play, its tune half mourning, half lullaby. She listens, and for a moment, she lets herself feel. Not ambition, not fear, just the faintest hum of something forgotten. Once, she had a name. Not the one they gave her here, but a real one. A name spoken by a mother in the morning light. A name shouted across fields by brothers chasing goats. That name no longer fits inside her mouth. It has been filed away, replaced, smothered beneath perfumes and titles. She wonders if her mother would recognize her now. The harem teaches many things. How to speak without speaking. How to cry without tears. How to charm without promising. How to exist without taking up space. But no one teaches you how to forget yourself. That comes slowly, like rot. At dawn, the routine begins again. Servants carry in warm water, lemon-soaked towels, trays of fruits she can only nibble. A eunuch announces the names of the favored concubines for the day. Today, hers is not among them. Relief washes over her first, followed immediately by dread. Favor is a razor, too much of it, and the other girls become enemies. Too little, and you vanish. She is not yet sure which fate is worse. The courtyard opens like a wound under the morning sun. Peacocks strut across the tiles, shrieking, beautiful and useless. The fountain babbles with perfect indifference. Women gather in clusters, like petals pulled from a single flower and scattered by wind. Today is bath day, not for cleanliness, but for ritual. The Sultan, it is said, prefers women who smell of jasmine and honey, who float through steam like apparitions. The bathhouse is a separate prison, a warmer one, perhaps, but no less ruthless. Stripped of their robes, the women become bare versions of themselves. Some cover their breasts shyly. Others display their beauty like merchants in a market. All are aware that they are being watched, not by the guards, by each other. Competition here is silent but vicious. Every glance is a calculation, every smile a trap. No one says it aloud, but each woman dreams of the same thing: to rise, to be chosen again, to be kept, even if that means the others must fall. She slips into the hot water. Steam curls around her like ghost fingers. A girl beside her brushes scented oil into her hair. Another scrubs her arms with rose sugar paste. She lets it happen. She floats, eyes closed, pretending to be anywhere else. Pretending is the first language of survival here. When she opens her eyes again, she sees a new girl across the pool. She's young, too young. Her skin is unblemished, her posture unsure. She is wrapped in the white of the freshly taken, the newly arrived. Her eyes dart like a bird's, and she flinches when a eunuch walks by. The others watch her, measuring her quickly. She will either rise fast or be consumed slowly. The harem never forgets its hierarchy. Later they are back in their chambers. Needlework is brought out, not because it matters, but because idle hands lead to idle thoughts, and idle thoughts here are dangerous. She sews patterns she does not care about, onto fabric no one will wear. Every stitch is a heartbeat she doesn't own. A girl leans over and whispers, "He asked for Safia twice this week." The statement hovers. Everyone hears it. Safia is silent. She does not smile. She simply continues to embroider. Lilies, she always sews lilies, and her silence says more than any boast could. Tonight, the Sultan may call for her again. Or not. Either way, the others will prepare themselves. Each will perfume their wrists and bathe again, just in case, because no one is safe from being forgotten. That evening, they gather in the music room, not to entertain, but to be seen. The Sultan's spies watch everything. Which girls speak too often? Which ones quarrel? Which ones sit beside each other too fondly? Affection here is dangerous. Love, even the hint of it, is suicide. She plays the oud softly, a gentle melody, delicate as frost. She knows the Sultan will not come tonight, but still, she plays. Because someone is always watching. Because sometimes the game is not about winning, but simply staying in the game. Afterward, she returns to her cushion, to her birds without wings, to the silence between breaths. Tonight, she is alone, not summoned, not desired, not remembered. She breathes out slowly, and wonders if, perhaps, this is the truest freedom she will ever taste in the harem. To be invisible, to not be touched, to disappear, just for one night, into the folds of her own skin. But she knows it will not last. In the harem, nothing ever does. The harem is not a place of noise. Its tragedies happen in whispers. The girl who once smiled too brightly is now mute. The girl who sang lullabies in the garden has been sent away, where no one knows. And the one who dared fall in love, her name is no longer spoken. There is a rhythm to the ruin here. Each morning begins with perfume. Each evening ends in longing. And in between, the hours drip like honey from a tilted spoon. She no longer counts the days. There are no seasons in the harem, only the shifting moods of the Sultan. The calendar is kept by the women's bodies, their swelling bellies, their bleeding moons, their fading skin. Time here is measured by favor, and favor is cruel. Tonight, the lamps burn lower than usual. The walls feel closer. The velvet curtains feel heavier. The silence feels different. Not restful, but expectant. Something is coming. She hears it in the way the eunuchs whisper, in the way the concubines avoid each other's eyes. Rumor has arrived like a fever. The Sultan is displeased. A new favorite from the border provinces, one with green eyes and a laugh like silk, has insulted the Queen Mother. No one speaks the details. It's not the details that matter, only the aftermath. Because when the Sultan is displeased, someone always pays. The women begin preparing early, not for pleasure, for survival. She applies her kohl with steady hands, though her stomach turns. She rubs musk behind her ears, oils her arms, braids her hair in silence. Every movement is a prayer in disguise. Every act of adornment is a form of surrender. She doesn't know if she will be chosen tonight, but she must prepare as if she will. To do anything less is dangerous. She joins the others in the antechamber, the one with mother-of-pearl floors and pale blue lanterns that never flicker. They wait, lined up like rare books on a shelf. A eunuch stands at the far end, reading names from a scroll. The first name he calls is not hers, nor the second. The third is Safiya. The fourth is a girl who fainted in the baths last week. The fifth, he pauses, looks up. Her name, spoken not like a question, but like a sentence. The room shifts, not physically, but emotionally. She feels the breath of the women beside her still. No one says anything. They don't have to. She knows what they're thinking. Tonight is a test, not a reward. She follows the eunuch down the corridor, past the carved doors, past the fountain with the stone turtles, past the room where women once played chess and now sit silently, embroidering nothing. Her feet make no sound, but her heart does. When she enters the Sultan's chamber, the first thing she notices is the cold. The brazier is burning, but the air is sharp. The Sultan sits on a divan, his face in shadow, his robes folded like armor. He does not smile. He does not gesture. He simply watches her. And she knows this is not about lust, it is about power. He asks her to play the oud. She does. Her fingers move with precision, but not with feeling. She plays the same melody she played in the music room, but here it feels different, hollow, like an echo of something already dead. He asks her to dance. She does, but her feet feel heavy, her hips stiff. She is not Safiya. She is not the green-eyed girl from the provinces. She is something else, something quieter, less gilded, less sharp. He tells her to stop. She freezes. He does not speak again. He waves his hand and the eunuchs appear from behind the screens, silent as ghosts. She is dismissed, but not punished. And somehow that feels worse. She returns to her chamber, her heart beating so hard it bruises her ribs. She waits for the consequences. None come. She waits for the gossip. None arrives. By morning, it is as if the night never happened. That is how the harem works. It erases. Not just the women who fail, but the memory of them. She understands now. To survive here is not to win favor, but to escape notice, to become a part of the architecture, to be lovely, but never loved, to be seen, but never remembered. She goes to the courtyard and watches the birds again. One of them, a peacock with a torn tail, limps past her. It is still beautiful, but it cannot fly. She thinks of her mother again, of that name she no longer says. She whispers it once into the lemon tree's leaves, knowing it will go unheard. But something in her softens, just for a moment, and in that softness, something hardens too. A decision. She will never rise here, but she will not fall either. She will endure. Like the marble columns, like the stories the eunuchs never tell, like the music that haunts the harem even after the strings are broken, because sometimes survival is the greatest rebellion. And in this prison of silk and gold, survival is a quiet kind of victory. The doors of the harem closed with a whisper, soft, heavy, final. Behind them, the world changed. The air grew thick with perfume and secrets. Lamps flickered against mosaic walls, casting golden shadows that danced across silk cushions and embroidered screens. Outside, the palace was a fortress of marble and politics. Inside, the harem was something else entirely. It was a dream gilded in beauty, and a nightmare sharpened by envy. No man but the Sultan could enter, and no woman inside could ever truly leave. On this quiet night, beneath the soft hum of crickets and the distant calls of guards along the palace walls, Dozens of women moved like whispers through corridors lined with velvet curtains. Their slippers made no sound. Their eyes darted, always watching, always calculating. For in the harem, beauty was currency, and the affection of the Sultan was power. To be adored was to be elevated. To be forgotten was to decay in golden silence. A new concubine had arrived that morning. She was young, with eyes like still water, and a voice that clung to the walls like incense. The others had noticed her immediately. They noticed everything in here, every gift, every smile. Every night the Sultan spent in someone's bed. Jealousy didn't scream in the harem. It dripped slowly like poisoned honey into rose tea. The older women knew what was coming. They had seen it before. The subtle war that began with whispers and ended with banishment, or worse. The moment a new favorite rose in the Sultan's gaze, old alliances trembled. Friendships withered like overwatered flowers. And then, the knives came out. Not always real knives, but the other kind. Rumors, bribes, secrets whispered into the right ears. A lace veil pulled too tightly, a gown embroidered with sharp thorns. Tonight, as candles melted into puddles of amber light, the war began again. Fatima, the Sultan's current favorite, sat beneath a lattice window combing her long black hair. She had held his heart for nearly 3 seasons, a lifetime in harem years. She wore a deep green robe, the color of envy itself, and her jewelry clinked like distant thunder. Her eyes, outlined in kohl, were fixed on the moon, but her mind was far from serene. She had seen the way the Sultan looked at the new girl. Her name was Zuleha. She hadn't even been given her chamber yet. For now, she slept in the common quarters, on a mattress thin as papyrus, surrounded by other hopefuls still waiting for their moment. But that was how they all began. Fatima had started the same way. One glance, one night, one seed of affection planted deep in the Sultan's favor, and the garden bloomed. But gardens can be overgrown, and weeds, once nourished, are hard to kill. The hierarchy of the harem was invisible but absolute. At the top sat the Valid Sultan, the Sultan's mother, her word law, her gaze icy. Below her were the Khadins, the official wives or consorts ranked by favor and children born. Below them, the Iqbals, the favored ones. Then came the Gozdes, the ones who had merely caught his eye. At the bottom, the novices, nameless and silent, serving the rest in silence. Zuleha was still a novice, but Fatima feared she wouldn't be for long, and so the games began. First, a misplaced comb, then a robe stained with jasmine oil that burned the skin if left too long. Small things, petty things. But in the harem, every detail mattered. Appearances were everything. A single blemish could shift the winds of favor. Zuleha tried not to react. She had been trained in silence, raised in the household of a pasha who had gifted her to the Sultan like a rare jewel. Wrapped in velvet and shame, she had been told the harem was a paradise, a palace within a palace, but no one had mentioned the hunger in women's eyes, the gnawing desperation to be seen, chosen, remembered. Still she smiled when spoken to, she bowed when ordered, she sang softly when alone. But Fatima noticed the servants starting to linger near her, the younger girls watching her walk, the older concubines frowning when her name was mentioned. Rumors began to float through the scented halls like smoke, that the Sultan had asked about her, that he had summoned a gift for her, a silk sash from Damascus, that he would visit the new wing tomorrow night. Fatima didn't sleep that night. In her chamber, lined with cushions and perfumes, she paced barefoot, her ankles tinkling with bells. Her mind raced. She had fought for everything. Her family had sold her before she could read. She had survived the training, the poisonings, the long winters without a summons. She had been forgotten, then remembered, had borne a child that didn't survive the cradle, had climbed to the very edge of power, close enough to taste it, and now this girl, this water-eyed stranger, would take it all. Not if she could help it. The next day, Fatima visited the chief eunuch. She brought a gift, figs dipped in rose syrup and wrapped in silk. She whispered soft concerns about Zuleha's origins. Perhaps the girl had spoken disrespectfully of the Valid Sultan. Perhaps she had come from a family with questionable loyalties. The eunuch said nothing, but later 2 guards came to inspect Zuleha's quarters. They found nothing, but the fear lingered. Zuleha remained silent. She knew what was happening, and she knew how to wait. In the courtyard garden, among the fountains and orange trees, women gathered like swans. Beautiful, cautious, cruel. They fanned themselves beneath stone archways, exchanged news of the Sultan's mood, discussed fabrics and poetry and who had wept last night. But under the surface, it was all calculation. Every compliment was barbed, every glance a dagger. Zuleha walked there alone now, the others watching her closely. She sat beneath a fig tree, her book open, her gaze calm. But inside, her thoughts ran fast. She didn't want a war, but she would not be swallowed. The harem wasn't just a prison, it was a battlefield, one where the weapons were veiled and the wounds never bled in public. In the days that followed, alliances shifted. One of the older concubines, Layla, who had long been ignored, began speaking kindly to Zuleha. Another, Aysun, started avoiding Fatima's eyes. The tide was turning, and Fatima knew it. She decided it was time. She summoned her own allies. Yasmin, who had once helped her hide a rival's bracelet. Nur, who owed her for a favor long past. Together, they wove a plan, something subtle, something final, a letter, planted, carefully forged, hidden in Zuleha's chamber. A letter to an unknown man, realistic, passionate, incriminating. They placed it beneath the cushion of her sleeping mat, and then they waited. But the harem had eyes everywhere. The Valid Sultan heard of it first. She summoned the chief eunuch, who retrieved the letter. Then she called Zuleha. In the great chamber of mirrors, where the Valid sat in robes of crimson and gold, Zuleha knelt in silence as the letter was read aloud. Her hands didn't tremble. Her eyes didn't blink. When asked if she had written it, she simply said no, and then she asked something bold. "May I speak alone with the Valid Sultan?" It was unheard of, but curiosity moved mountains. When the room emptied, Zuleha rose to her feet and said quietly, "If you read that letter again, you will notice the ink is fresh. It hasn't aged even one day. The corner was folded too perfectly, and the name signed at the bottom belongs to a man executed 2 years ago." The Valid's eyes narrowed. "You were trained well," she said. "I was trained for survival," Zuleha replied. The Valid said nothing more, but the next morning, Fatima's chamber was found empty. Her belongings had vanished. Her name was not spoken again, and Zuleha remained. It began with whispers, the kind that lived in shadows and clung to silk curtains. One eunuch passing a note to another, one concubine brushing her hand along the gold-embroidered sash of another, not out of affection, but to check how finely she had been gifted. One jealous glance across the marble courtyard. That was all it ever took. In the grand harem of the imperial palace, be it in Constantinople, Cairo, or Isfahan, jealousy wasn't merely a passing feeling. It was a living, breathing force, as present as the scent of rosewater in the air, and as dangerous as the silence of a locked door in the dead of night. The Sultan, after all, had many wives, or none at all. If the mullahs whispered he had only concubines, semantics hardly mattered. What mattered was favor, and favor was fleeting. Every morning, as the sun rose and filtered through carved lattice windows, the women of the harem began their rituals, bathing in scented water, oils rubbed into the skin until it shone like polished pearl, hair braided in intricate patterns meant to entice, dazzle, and provoke envy. They dressed not for comfort, not for themselves, but for war. The battleground was veiled in velvet and shadow, but the stakes were as real as a blade drawn at dawn. The Sultan's attention was currency. A glance could elevate a girl from obscurity to power. One night in his bed, and she might be gifted a suite of rooms, a retinue of servants, and a whisper of authority. But that same glance could become a death sentence for another, if not literal, then social, emotional, or spiritual. Jealousy festered in every silken corridor. There were games, of course, the silent ones where perfumes were swapped for vinegar, where needles were left in cushions, where hair oils were laced with irritants. More subtle still were the psychological games, compliments with the softest blade underneath. "You look so well today. Have you gained a little?" The Sultan loves softness, they say. Or, "Such a lovely bracelet." It looks very similar to one his mother used to wear. Then there were the alliances. No one survived long in the harem alone. A woman needed sisters, informants, and spies. Even her own maidservants might sell secrets to rivals. Friendships were formed not from trust, but from necessity, and the moment one woman rose, others would gather to watch her fall. There is a saying among the women of the harem: when the moon rises over one concubine's bed, it sets over another's heart. It was not uncommon for new girls, bright-eyed, hopeful, still smelling of their village homes, to crumble under the pressure. Many arrived believing they had been chosen for beauty, for destiny, for romance. But the truth became clear soon enough. They were not princesses in waiting. They were pawns in an invisible game. Take the case of Shirin, a Persian girl of exceptional grace. She arrived to the palace gardens with jasmine tucked behind her ear and a smile that disarmed everyone. Within weeks, she had caught the Sultan's attention. Her laughter echoed through the halls. Her chambers were flooded with gifts, and so she was marked. One of the elder consorts, Layla, who had once been the favorite herself, began orchestrating her decline. It started with murmurs that Shirin was immodest, disrespectful, that she laughed too freely, spoke too much. Then came the accidents. A dye bottle spilled on her favorite gown. A sleeping powder slipped into her sherbet, causing her to miss her invitation to the Sultan's chamber one night. Within a month, Shirin was no longer laughing, but the true descent came in silence. Her name disappeared from the list of those permitted in the Sultan's garden walks. Her gifts were returned unopened, her maids were reassigned, and then she was gone. Some said she had been sent to a lesser palace. Others claimed she had fallen ill, but among the women of the harem, they knew she had lost the game. And once you fall in a world made of whispers and silks, no one dares to catch you. Yet the tragedy of Shirin was not unique. It was cyclical. Every harem bore its own myths, its own tragedies etched into the tiles. Some women, in desperation, turned to sorcery. Quiet prayers written in henna on the soles of their feet. Amulets hidden beneath their bodices. A strand of the Sultan's hair tied with saffron thread and buried beneath the moon. Such practices were forbidden, of course, but in a place where the heart determined one's fortune, women often placed their hopes in the unseen. Others became queens of manipulation. They played the game not with fear, but with ferocity. They understood the rhythms of court politics, the nuances of timing, the potency of silence. One smile withheld, one rumor spread at the right moment, and they could tilt the balance of power. These were the women the younger ones feared most, not because they were cruel, but because they were effective. And always, always there was the Sultan, the man at the center of the storm, a figure both omnipotent and oblivious. Some were gentle, others were brutal, but all were kings, and their favor was everything. At times, they enjoyed watching the rivalries play out. It flattered them, it reinforced their importance. Other times, they grew weary of the drama and banished all parties involved. The court poets called this the winter of women, when the Sultan's heart froze to all. Yet even in that frost, jealousy endured. Sometimes women formed false friendships to disarm their rivals. They would sit together, paint each other's hands with henna, whisper stories of the Sultan's preferences. They would laugh over stories of other harem collapses, all while preparing the next betrayal. In some harems, a senior consort, often the Sultan's mother or a favorite wife, held significant authority. She could protect or destroy. Her blessing meant access. Her disapproval meant exile. Thus, the jealousy extended not only between the concubines themselves, but toward the hierarchy above. And jealousy could be generational. Mothers taught their daughters how to survive in silk cages. They warned them never to turn their back on a weeping rival. They taught them how to cry without smudging their coal, how to walk past a favored girl without revealing their rage. There were even women who trained specifically in the art of seduction and emotional warfare. Dancers who moved with calculated grace. Storytellers who knew how to charm not just the Sultan, but his viziers, his guards, his friends. Every gesture had purpose. Every glance was measured. In these gilded prisons, a woman's worth was not just in her beauty, but in her cunning. Even sleep became dangerous. Nightmares were not just dreams, but memories. Of eyes watching from the doorway, of silks that rustled with hidden intentions, of voices behind walls. laughing a second too long, of a dream that ended with your name struck from the list of women allowed to dine in the main chamber. The harem was quiet, always quiet, but it was never peaceful. At its heart, jealousy was a scream buried in silk, a blade hidden behind a smile. It twisted love into competition. It made beauty a weapon. It turned women into enemies, not because they wanted war, but because the system demanded it. And the walls, they remembered. Every mosaic, every carved inscription, every jeweled fountain had watched women rise and fall. The walls had heard confessions whispered into pillows, had felt the tremble of footsteps pacing in anxiety. They had borne witness to seductions, betrayals, exiles, and sometimes deaths. The palace itself became complicit. It offered luxury, yes, but always at a cost. And jealousy, in the end, was the most constant companion of all. Not the silks, nor the songs, nor even the Sultan, just jealousy, waiting in the corner, smiling with painted lips. The wind whispered through the corridors of the harem like a ghost carrying secrets. Outside, the marble courtyards basked under the silver glow of the moon, but inside, under the glimmer of hanging lanterns, hearts beat in quiet, watchful terror. For each woman in the Sultan's harem, the night did not bring rest. It brought calculation, fear, and anticipation, for a whisper, for a glance, for a rumor that could ruin a rescue. In the oldest corners of the palace, where the walls themselves seemed to lean in to listen, the senior consorts, the Khadins, met in near silence. Once, they had entered this palace as girls, beautiful, hopeful, frightened. Now, they were battle-hardened veterans of invisible wars. Their gowns were embroidered with peacocks and roses, their hair thick with perfumed oil, but beneath the silks were scars, emotional, political, sometimes literal. Jealousy had long since ceased to be a petty emotion in the harem. It had matured into a governing law. When a favorite of the Sultan gave birth to a son, she did not only bring joy, she declared war on the rest. That boy, if he lived long enough, might one day inherit the empire, and his mother would rule beside him, wielding a kind of power the other women could only dream of. But first, that woman would have to survive the storm her fortune had conjured. This was how the battleground took shape. Not with swords, not with armies, but with poison slipped into sherbets, with forged letters, with the subtle suggestion whispered into a eunuch's ear that a rival had spoken ill of the Sultan's judgment. In a world where the women could not even leave the palace, their battlefield was the air they breathed. In one such case, there was a young woman named Selim, brought to the palace from Circassia. Her beauty was said to have silenced even the Grand Vizier upon her first procession through the harem gates. But beauty alone was not enough. It had to be guarded like treasure. When the Sultan noticed her, when he sent for her, when she returned with jeweled bangles on her wrists and a new softness in her step, everything changed. The other women took note. Not openly, that would be foolish. But the old hierarchy shifted. Selim's laundry began returning with tears in the silk. Her favorite rose oil mysteriously vanished. She was assigned different attendants. Whispers followed her like smoke. The harem had turned its gaze on her, and Selim, barely 16, could feel it pressing against her every movement. In another time, in another place, the women might have been allies, sisters, but not here, not under this roof. Here, the very walls pulsed with a single truth. The Sultan's affection was the most dangerous currency a woman could possess. That affection, fickle as it was, birthed rivals out of friends. A woman might dance alongside her companion during the Lantern Festival and then feed her to the wolves with a single complaint in the Sultan's ear. A fleeting touch of his hand could elevate one and condemn the other to the dusty shadows of forgotten rooms. And so, jealousy was not a failing. It was a survival strategy. The hierarchy of the harem was rigid but ever-shifting, like dunes in the desert. At the top sat the Valid Sultan, the Sultan's mother, whose power was nearly absolute. Below her were the official wives, sometimes only one, often more. Then came the Khadins, favored concubines, often mothers of the Sultan's children. Below them were the Iqbals and Gozdes, the hopefuls, the favorites in waiting. And at the very bottom, new arrivals, fresh from the markets or sent as political gifts, who often didn't yet understand that the harem was a chessboard and they were pawns. The Valid Sultan, if cunning enough, played queen. She watched over all. Some chose to cultivate alliances, weaving loyalty among the younger women with kindness and gifts. Others ruled with fear, turning informants into favored pets and banishing threats at the first hint of disobedience. A word from her could remove a girl from the Sultan's bed forever, and when jealousy simmered too hot between rivals, she was both judge and executioner. In the time of Sultan Ibrahim I, remembered by history as unstable, even mad, the harem teetered on chaos. His obsession with a single concubine, Humasha, sent tremors through the palace. The other women grew restless. The Valid Sultan warned him that too much favor would stir unrest, but Ibrahim cared little for diplomacy. He lavished Humasha with gifts, an emerald as large as a pigeon's egg, a bathhouse made of jade, even a small village granted to her name. The jealousy this provoked was unlike any the palace had seen in decades. Rumors spread that Humasha was poisoning other women, that she was weaving spells, that she had seduced the chief eunuch to serve her whims. Whether true or not, the damage was done. Several women were found dead in their rooms over the following months. No marks, no signs of struggle, just pale bodies and the faintest scent of bitter almonds. Some believed it was a quiet purge. Others believed it was the Valid Sultan herself, cleaning house before the jealousy burned the palace down. The eunuchs, keepers of order in this veiled world, were often tasked with investigating such incidents, but they, too, were not immune to politics. Bribes flowed like honey, loyalties shifted like shadows, and the women, ever astute, knew how to play them. A compliment here, a secret whispered there. Soon, a eunuch might find himself delivering a rival's pillow laced with sleeping powder, or replacing an embroidered gown with one subtly soaked in skin-itching oil. In one especially vicious episode during the reign of Sultan Ahmed III, two sisters, Banu and Yasemin, were brought to the palace together. They had been inseparable as children, trained side by side, even chosen for the Sultan on the same day. At first, they vowed to protect each other, but when Banu bore the Sultan a child, Yasemin's world crumbled. The bond that once tethered them frayed under the weight of ambition. What began as silence soon turned to small betrayals. Yasemin arranged for Banu's attendants to be replaced. She sent false letters suggesting Banu was planning to flee the palace. When these failed, she turned to darker methods. It is said she bribed a cook to deliver a dish laced with ground glass. Banu never ate it, but the Sultan's pet monkey did, and died howling in its golden cage. That was all the Valid Sultan needed. Yasemin was exiled to the old palace within hours. She never saw her sister, or the Sultan, again. Stories like these filtered down to every corner of the harem, told in hushed voices behind screens and over shared combs. They were cautionary tales, yes, but also instruction manuals. For the next girl who might find herself the Sultan's favorite would surely need to know the cost of power, and the price of jealousy uncontained. Even those who did not wish to climb the ladder, those who longed only for quiet, were not spared. Neutrality was a myth. To abstain from intrigue was to make oneself suspicious. Who was she loyal to? Why did she not gossip like the others? Why did she spend so much time with the eunuchs or alone in the garden? Innocence in the harem was interpreted as cunning. There were women who tried to escape it all, not the palace, which was nearly impossible, but the game. They feigned madness, fasted for days, mutilated their beauty to avoid the Sultan's gaze. Some succeeded, most did not. The machine of the harem was relentless, and jealousy was its fuel, but not every story ended in ruin. A few women, through patience and unparalleled cleverness, navigated the battleground not with daggers but with empathy. They built coalitions, protected the vulnerable, and earned the trust of the Valid Sultan. They understood that power gained through cruelty was brittle, and though rare, these women often became the most enduring figures in the harem's long and shadowed history. As dawn approached and the prayer call echoed faintly over the palace domes, the lamps in the harem began to dim. The corridors emptied. Behind veils and carved doors, the women returned to their rooms, each carrying the weight of the night's silent war. Some would sleep, others would lie awake, wondering which glance, which word, might unravel the balance they had fought so hard to keep. And always, beneath the gold and silk, beneath the scent of jasmine and rose, jealousy simmered, quiet, invisible, eternal. The corridors of the harem grew colder with age. not in temperature, but in spirit. The elder concubines, once flowers in bloom, now cast long shadows in the gilded halls. Their smiles had faded into cautious glances. Their hands once used to caress, now curled around whispered secrets and silken blades of gossip. Those who had once held favor lived in a twilight zone, neither queen nor servant. They watched from balconies, cloaked in fading silks, as the newer concubines, bright-eyed, fragrant with ambition, entered the same brutal game. Some pitied them, others plotted, but age did not always mean weakness. These women knew the system better than anyone. They had memorized every turning of the wheel, every twitch in the emperor's brow, every tremor in the voice of his viziers, and in many cases they still held influence, not through beauty, but through knowledge, manipulation, and fear. One such woman, known only as Lady Zuleika, had not been touched by the emperor in 15 years, yet her name was spoken in hushed tones by every servant and guard. She knew every escape tunnel, every alliance, every servant's debt and loyalty. She had trained spies from among the laundry girls and whisperers from the bathhouse. Young concubines who underestimated her paid in silence, or exile, or madness. One night, a new favorite, a girl no older than 16, disappeared. Rumors spread that she had tried to poison her rival. Others claimed she had insulted Lady Zuleika's chambermaid, but none dared ask too loudly. The palace physician was seen carrying a small wrapped bundle to the gardens that night, no larger than a baby goat. The air in the harem thickened. Even the eunuchs began to dread their daily duties. These men, bound by service and stripped of their own agency, had once been impartial observers. But jealousy is a contagious rot. Some became pawns in the games. Others became instruments of vengeance. One eunuch, Arman, was found weeping beside a cistern. His tongue had been removed, his hands tied in silken cords. A message had been left in rose petals by his side. Loyalty has no voice. Still the show continued. When the emperor walked through the harem, the women still bowed like waves rippling through silk. They still smiled with lowered eyes, but beneath each smile was a storm. Even music turned into warfare. A concubine who could master the ode or sing a forgotten lullaby from the emperor's childhood gained not just favor, but ammunition. One girl spent 3 months composing a song in secret, one that mentioned in riddled metaphor the downfall of her rival. She sang it with trembling voice beneath the garden lanterns, and within a week, her enemy was accused of witchcraft. The harem, once a sanctuary of beauty and charm, became a theater of psychological war, and the cost of losing was not always death. Sometimes it was worse. Some women went mad, not loudly, but quietly. They began to talk to mirrors, to sew invisible patterns into cloth, to braid their hair into knots that resembled no style known to the palace. These were not outbursts, but unravelings, the slow erosion of a mind no longer able to protect itself. Others lost themselves in rituals, scrubbing their rooms until the marble floors glowed, or bathing so often their skin peeled in flakes. These were the final fortresses of control in a world where nothing could be guaranteed, except betrayal. Some formed secret pacts. 2 concubines, once enemies, joined forces to bring down a mutual rival. They shared oils, shared poems, even shared beds with the emperor on alternate nights to maintain balance. But even these fragile alliances often turned sour. Trust in the harem was a candle lit in a storm, and all the while the emperor remained oblivious, or chose to be. To him, the harem was a garden of pleasure, not a battlefield. Or perhaps he enjoyed the chaos, as long as it did not disrupt his nightly peace. For emperors, too, play games, and sometimes they place foxes among the hens to see what will hatch. One day, Lady Zuleika vanished. Her chambers were sealed, her belongings removed. No one saw her leave, no one dared ask. But a week later, 3 other concubines fell ill. One died. Some said Zuleika had been sent to a monastery. Others believed she had finally been executed for knowing too much. But the older eunuchs only smiled sadly, as if they knew better. Some claimed she still roamed the palace at night, her slippers silent, her face veiled, whispering secrets into the ears of those who dared listen. Jealousy, by now, had transformed into something more corrosive. It was not about love or lust, it was about survival. In a system where a single sigh could change a woman's destiny, every glance was weaponized. Some concubines began to mark the walls of their rooms with symbols, charms for protection, prayers to old goddesses, runes stolen from folk traditions. The empire had many provinces, and the women came from many lands. Within the harem, old magics awoke, whispers of curses, tokens hidden under pillows, dried herbs tucked into sleeves. One girl, desperate and alone, smeared honey on her doorframe. When asked why, she only said, "So the demons will feed on something sweeter than me." That night, a fire broke out in the eastern quarters. It spread quickly, devouring 3 rooms. The girl survived. Her rival did not. And so the days passed. The harem remained gilded, scented with jasmine and rose, embroidered with gold, but beneath the beauty a pulse beat fast and nervous. In the evenings, the air was thick with incense and the tension of waiting. Who would be chosen? Who would be forgotten? Who would vanish before morning? The women dressed themselves as if for war, each fold of silk a shield, each drop of perfume a spell, each glance a calculated strike. The emperors changed, dynasties rose and fell, but the harem endured. It endured because it was never truly about one emperor, or one love, or one night of passion. It was about power, silent, seductive, dangerous power, the kind women learn to wield when all other weapons are taken from them. And in that cloistered world of whispers and secrets, jealousy was not just an emotion, it was a strategy, it was a currency, it was a crown.